Chapter 867. Chu Liuxin sat in the pavilion behind the palace curtain. He frowned and his face was gloomy. The originally handsome and sunny young man became a little gloomy. "Master, should we still go to see the empress?" Xiao Lu followed behind Chu Liuxin and asked cautiously. They were originally going to see the emperor. Hearing that the emperor was here, Chu Liuxin hid here. Since that incident, Chu Liuxin tried his best not to meet the emperor unless it was absolutely necessary. "We'll go later," Chu Liuxin said. He looked through the gauze curtain and imagined that he could go out whenever he wanted in the past, instead of the current situation. He felt ashamed of his inferiority and felt that he had no face to see her. There was a sharp pain in his heart. She was going to get married, and she was going to marry third brother. In fact, he had no reason to see her anymore. If it weren't for Xiao Yanru, if that thing didn't happen, perhaps he would be the one who was engaged to her at this time. As long as he thought of this possibility, Chu Liuxin felt heartache. After waiting for a while, Xiao Lu said uneasily, "Master, we have waited for a while. We can go out now. The empress may come to us later." After entering the Fengyi Palace, they did not go to see the empress. The empress would definitely be suspicious when she found out. "Let's go." Chu Liuxin stood up. "Let's go back," Xiao Lu said in surprise. "Yes." Chu Liuxin had already strode out, and Xiao Lu could only follow closely behind. In the attic, Xiao Wanru and the other two were leaning against the railing and looking into the distance. Suddenly, they saw Chu Liuxin appear in their sight. They could not tell who he was from his back, but they could vaguely tell that he was a young noble. "Isn't this Prince Shou?" Zhang Qilan said in surprise. The person who appeared in the Empress Palace at this time was most likely Prince Shou. Prince Chen had just left, so it was impossible for him to appear here at this time. Moreover, the clothes that Prince Chen wore just now were different from what they saw now. Zhang Qilan was engaged to Chu Luyue, so she did not feel any burden mentioning Prince Shou. Infanta Yuan blushed. She also thought that it was Prince Shou. Only Xiao Wanru's eyes were a little hesitant. She could not recognize who it was at the moment, but it did not seem to be Prince Shou. "It seems so," Princess Yuan said hesitantly. Her face was slightly red. She was the future princess of Zhou, so she felt a bit embarrassed to see her like this. Perhaps in order to share the embarrassment, Infanta Yuan turned to look at Xiao Wanru and said, "Fifth Miss is going to marry Prince Chen soon. Is the dowry ready? I heard that when Infanta Qinghua married into Marquis Xing's mansion, she had 10 miles of red dowry. Now it should be all left to you. Grandma gave me part of it and left some for Hao. Xiao Wanru blinked her eyes, which were as beautiful as thousands of colored glaze. "Has your brother been raised in the great elder princess residence?" Infanta Yuan became curious. "He is the son of Marquis Xing's mansion and the only legitimate son of the former heir of Duke Xing. In fact, it is better for him to stay in Marquis Xing's mansion." The meaning of her words was very subtle, but Xiao Wanru still understood it. She smiled at once and said, "Hao is still young, and I'm old, so I don't have time to take care of him. Grandma happens to have the time and energy to take care of Hao. Will it affect him if we don't let him go back now?" Zhang Qilan's attention was also attracted. Even though she looked a little naive, she couldn't help whispering at this time. Since Xiao Wanru returned to the family 3 years ago, there had been doubts about the position of heir of Marquis Xing's mansion. Marquis Xing had asked for the title of heir of Duke Xing for his son and Xiao Yuanhao. At present, it was really uncertain who would get the position of heir of Duke Xing. But one thing was certain. If Xiao Yuanhao lived in the great elder princess residence all the time, it would not be good for him. At least, it would not be good for him to inherit the position of heir of Duke Xing, and he would not be recognized by the Xiao family. Although the title of Marquis Xing was bestowed by the emperor, it should be recognized by the Xiao family. This kind of thing. I don't know either. Xiao Wanru didn't want to talk about these things. She just shook her head vaguely, indicating that she didn't understand. Fifth Miss, are you sure about your brother? Infanta Yuan gently covered the corner of her mouth with a handkerchief and teased her carelessly. How can I be sure about this kind of thing? I just want to be safe. Xiao Wanru smiled bitterly and said lightly. She didn't want to talk too much about this matter. She looked at a cluster of flowers not far away and stood up. What kind of flower is that? It doesn't look like a winter jasmine, does it? At this time, the first to bloom was the winter jasmine, but the cluster of flowers in front of her was not. The flowers were charming and graceful, not the kind of small winter jasmine. I can't tell what it is. Maybe it's a flower offered by a foreign country. It's so beautiful. Zhang Qilan also stood up and was amazed. She couldn't see it when she was sitting in her seat just now. I heard that it was sent by a small country. I can't remember it at the moment. The palace maid in the Empress Palace said it when she led me in. Infanta Yuan said with a smile. It turns out that when you came here just now, you took a look at the Fengyi Palace. When I came in, I just followed the palace maid who led the way into the main hall in a hurry and didn't have time to stroll around. Zhang Qilan said enviously. I may have come a little early, so the Empress asked someone to show me around the palace first. Infanta Yuan explained with a smile. Xiao Wanru glanced at Infanta Yuan's beautiful but not aggressive face. Infanta Yuan was very delicate, not very conspicuous. At first glance, she was not very eye-catching, especially among a group of beautiful women. But after a closer look, she was still good-looking. In addition, she spoke decently and calmly, which gave people a good impression. But Xiao Wanru felt that she should be wary of this infanta. What he had said just now sounded like a casual conversation, but the meaning behind his words was somewhat different. Xiao Wanru didn't know whether Infanta Yuan really just said it casually or said it deliberately. But there was one thing she was sure of. Some words could not be said casually. As the granddaughter of great elder princess and the future Princess Shou, how could she be so ignorant? She repeatedly hinted that she was determined to win the position of heir of Marquis Xing. She was just a weak girl who stayed in a boudoir, so what could she do? Unless Chu Luqian helped her. But there was another problem. How many people could Chu Luqian use? How many people could help her fight for the position of heir of Marquis Xing's mansion? The meaning of inquiring was obvious. In the last life, Infanta Yuan was Princess Shou. It was said that she had a good relationship with Prince Zhou and was valued by the Empress. She had seen Infanta Yuan, who became Princess Shou, from a distance. She was surrounded by people, noble and arrogant, which was very different from her current attitude. Moreover, in the last life, Xiao Yanru had a good relationship with Infanta Yuan. The Empress really takes care of you. Zhang Qilan sighed with a teasing smile on her face. Infanta Yuan blushed inexplicably and coughed in a low voice. I mean it. Look, I didn't say anything. Why do you emphasize it so much? Zhang Qilan laughed and bent down. What a coincidence. His Royal Highness Prince of Zhou was also here just now. Did Prince of Zhou accompany you for a while? Hearing her words, Infanta Yuan blushed even more. She glanced at her coquettishly and said, You're talking nonsense. I don't want to talk to you. I'd better talk to the 5th Mississippi. Why didn't you make fun of the 5th Miss Xiao when you saw Prince Chen just now? Seeing that the two of them changed the topic, Xiao Wanru shook her hands and said repeatedly, You two can talk, but don't involve me. I didn't ask anyone to accompany me to Fengyi Palace. You too. Infanta Yuan blushed. She pointed at Xiao Wanru and then at Zhang Qilan and said with grievance, 5th Miss Xiao, I didn't make fun of you just now. This appearance made Zhang Qilan laugh out loud in a rather embarrassing manner. While they were teasing, a palace maid came in and asked them to go back. She said that lunch had been prepared. They looked at the sky and found that it was still early. When they followed the palace maid to the lunch place, Qi Rongji and another miss were already waiting there. Then a eunuch came and told them that the empress was not feeling well, so they could help themselves. There were palace maids and eunuchs around them. Even though the empress was not there, the meal was very tight. After a few mouthfuls, the misses all put down their chopsticks. A eunuch arranged them to leave one by one in the palace sedan. When they arrived at the palace gate, they got on the carriages of each mansion and returned to the mansion gate. When Xiao Wanru was at the gate of the mansion, she saw Yan Shi, who came back in a hurry. Her eyes flickered involuntarily. She rolled her watery eyes and winked at Yujie beside her. Yujie understood and took 2 steps forward and bowed respectfully to Yan Shi. Child Yan. Yan Shi originally wanted to pretend that he didn't see her. If he walked faster, he could miss her. Now he knew that she was the 5th miss of Marquis Xing's mansion, the future Princess Chen. Yujie stopped him, but she had to greet Xiao Wanru now, especially when she turned around. Xiao Wanru had already bowed to her. Yan Shi hurriedly returned the greeting, 5th miss. I heard that child Yan came to the capital city for the spring examination. Xiao Wanru stood up and said coldly. It is indeed for this reason that I live in your mansion. Yan Shi nodded. Child Yan's ancestors have a good relationship with my grandfather. It is reasonable for you to live in the capital city. Xiao Wanru said with a smile, and then bowed sideways. Child Yan, I wish you a good result. Thank you for your kind words, 5th miss. Yan Shi stepped aside politely. Xiao Wanru walked past him slowly with Yujie and went to the inner courtyard. Old Madam had told her to report what had happened in the palace immediately after returning to the mansion. Seeing Xiao Wanru leave, Yan Shi frowned. Just when Xiao Wanru passed by, he heard Xiao Wanru say in a very low voice, Child Yan, be careful of the villains around you. Chapter 868. Remember in 1 second, 800 mail sign /say net wonderful pop-up window free reading. The slender figure disappeared behind the moon-shaped arch, and Yan Shi slowly retracted her gaze. Since she moved into Marquis Xing's mansion, she had little contact with other people in Marquis Xing's mansion. The person she had most contact with was Wang Xingxue, Marquis Xing's nephew. Was there anything wrong with Wang Xingxue? The first person Yan Shi thought of was Wang Xingxue. Originally, he had vaguely felt that there was something wrong with Wang Xingxue. Now that he thought about it, he felt that something was wrong. After all, he was not stupid, so he didn't ignore Xiao Wanru's words. Xiao Yanru was a girl in boudoir and the future Princess Chen. Yan Shi thought that it was impossible for her to speak carelessly, and there was no need for her to speak carelessly. Young master. The manservant behind Yan Shi reminded him when he saw that Yan Shi was standing still. This was the manservant he had brought from his own home. In order to take care of his daily life, his family had asked him to bring 2 manservants with him. One would take care of his daily life, and the other would take care of his brush and ink. Because this was a guest's residence, Yan Shi was also very careful to not let her manservant ask too much about anything. This was to prevent unnecessary misunderstandings. Go and find out about young Master Wang. Find out why he didn't take the scholarly examination. Yan Shi raised her head. She had already made up her mind. Wang Xingxue once told her about the imperial examination in spring and mentioned that he also had a scholarly title. Later, he hesitated and said that he was delayed by his sister's health and couldn't take the exam for the time being. Originally, Yan Shi didn't care about this matter, but now she inexplicably thought of it and specifically brought it up. Don't worry, young master. I will go and inquire about it in a while. The manservant said quickly. Having lived in Marquis Xing's mansion for a period of time, Yan Shi could find a few people to ask. It didn't take her long to get the news. Child, the servants in the mansion all say that Child Wang is a scoundrel. When his sister died, he extorted a sum of money from the mansion. I heard that Child Wang is a distant nephew of Marquis Xing, but he has a bad character and has wronged the 5th miss several times. His official title was removed after he annoyed the 5th Mississippi. Now he can't take the imperial examination even if he wants to. The servants of Marquis Xing's mansion really didn't have a good impression of Wang Xingxue. Although they didn't know the specific situation, it was obvious that Wang Xingxue had gained a lot of benefits and the servants of Marquis Xing's mansion had suffered losses. In the eyes of the servants, the best way was to drive him away directly and forbid him from coming here again. But when he came again, there was a message from the higher-ups, asking them to turn a blind eye to Wang Xingxue. After all, he was Master Ho's nephew, so they couldn't really be estranged from the Marquis's mansion. Things had already gotten to this point, and they were still talking about being distant. The servants didn't understand, but they didn't dare to talk about it. At most, they would look down on this young Master Wang in private. Child Wang has such a bad character. Yan Shi was shocked by the news he heard. Although he didn't like some of Wang Xingxue's behaviors, he had always regarded him as a gentleman and a courageous gentleman. He didn't expect that Wang Xingxue's character was so bad in private. After thinking for a moment, Yan Shi asked, "Are you sure?" "Don't worry, young master. I've specially inquired about several people, and I got the information by beating around the bush. It won't attract attention, but everyone said so," the servant said cleverly. Yan Shi fell silent. In fact, he had already somewhat believed it. In the past, when he and Wang Xingxue went out, the servants of Marquis Xing's mansion still saluted them and behaved respectfully, but sometimes he could always see that the servants' eyes were a little strange. When they looked at him, there was even a little pity in their eyes. Originally, he didn't understand what they meant, but now he understood a little. If Wang Xingxue really had a very bad character as he had heard, then there was something mysterious about his enthusiasm to help him save Miss Xiao before, right? Go to the back door of Miss Xiao's room later and keep an eye on her door to see who she is contacting with, especially whether Child Wang has gone there in private. Yan Shi immediately thought of Miss Xiao, who Wang Xingxue had helped enthusiastically, but failed to meet her relatives. She was robbed by a wicked young man and met him by chance. But what did it have to do with Wang Xingxue? The enthusiastic Wang Xingxue did not seem to be a person with a bad character, but the person the servant inquired about was the real Wang Xingxue. If it was really like this, there was something strange about it. Yan Shi had a strong feeling that Miss Xiao was the key figure. Because of Xiao Wanru's words, Yan Shi was enlightened and immediately secretly sent someone to investigate Miss Xiao, whom he had met in the capital city. Xiao Wanru went to the Chuntang courtyard first, and old madam had been waiting there for a long time. After listening to Xiao Wanru's detailed account of what had happened in the Fengyi Palace just now, her face darkened and she didn't speak for a long time. Xiao Wanru sat beside her and lowered her head, waiting for old madam's response. After a long while, old madam said slowly, "Fifth girl, do you think the Empress dislikes our Marquis's mansion?" Xiao Wanru raised the corners of her mouth and showed a cold sneer. At this time, old madam still hoped that the Empress disliked her instead of Marquis Xing's mansion. Xiao Wanru raised her head, and the sneer at the corners of her mouth disappeared. She shook her head calmly. Old madam looked at her eyes carefully. Her eyes were smart and pure. Although she was charming, she looked a little innocent. After all, she was still young. At this time, she just shook her head without saying anything, which seemed to be a little ignorant. "Fifth daughter, now the title of nobility of Duke Xing's mansion has become Marquis Xing's mansion. I feel ashamed to face your grandfather and father. Originally, it should be passed on to future generations. How is not young anymore." Old madam sighed and looked dispirited. Since the last time she fainted and woke up, old madam was not as energetic as she used to be. She looked very weak. When saying this, she suddenly felt sad. She wiped the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief, and her eyes were dark red. Xiao Wanru lowered her head. It was not easy to say this, and she didn't know how to say it, so she just waited and saw. How was not young anymore. It seemed that the title of the heir of Duke Xing belonged to Hao This was the first time that old madam had mentioned this in front of her. She pursed her red lips and didn't say anything. Seeing that Xiao Wanru was speechless, old madam was full of displeasure. She raised the corner of her eyes, suppressed the anger in her heart, and said in an increasingly low and gentle voice, I think of your father. This title was left by your father. Now, it has fallen to this point. I really have no face to see your grandfather and your father in the future. Everything has been fine, but when it comes to it, old madam was sad again, completely like an ordinary old lady. Thinking of her son who died early, she was extremely sad. Nanny Yu had begun to persuade her in a low voice, and she kept mentioning her father. Xiao Wanru clenched the handkerchief in her hand tightly, and her lowered eyes couldn't hide the cold sarcasm. When it was necessary, she would use her father to talk about it. When it was not necessary, she would even get herself killed. At this time, she repeatedly talked about the title. Needless to say, she had some new tricks, and this new trick must be to rely on her own strength or Chu Liuchen's strength. What a good idea. Old madam was sad, and Nanny Yu persuaded her again and again. Only Xiao Wanru sat there like a wooden figure and didn't respond at all. Old madam couldn't pretend anymore. She suddenly pushed Nanny Yu away and wanted to get angry. As a grandmother, she had been sad here for so long, but as a granddaughter, she just sat there without any reaction. As expected, she didn't grow up by her side and didn't even have any feelings for her. Old madam was extremely angry. Seeing that the situation was not good, Nanny Yu hurriedly took her hand and shook her head gently, indicating that she shouldn't get angry. Old madam suppressed her anger hard, and no longer beat around the bush. She said straightforwardly, Fifth girl, we still have to rely on you to restore the title of our mansion in the future. After all, you will be the future daughter-in-law of the royal family and the future Princess Chen. If you can persuade Prince Chen to speak for our mansion, it will definitely be effective. As expected, it was because of this. Xiao Wanru's watery eyes were deep. She slowly raised her head with a little shock in her eyes and said, Grandma, you don't have to feel embarrassed. Marquis Xing's mansion belongs to you juniors. At my age, I can still live for a few more years. What I want is to restore the title of nobility. Even if I die now, my mouth will be closed. Old madam interrupted Xiao Wanru and said impatiently. Grandma, Prince Chen doesn't have such great ability. Xiao Wanru said lightly. How can you know whether he has the ability or not without trying? It is said that Prince Chen is most favored by the Emperor and the Empress Dowager and can get whatever he wants. How can you know if you don't try? Old madam waved her hand and refused. Hearing Xiao Wanru's refusal, she directly drove her away and said, You are tired. Go to have a rest first and think about how to talk to Prince Chen about it. The title of nobility can't be left in our hands. She meant that no matter what, she had to let Xiao Wanru mention it to Chu Luchen and let Chu Luchen restore the honor of Duke Xing. After old madam finished speaking, she helped Nanny Yu to go in to have a rest, leaving Xiao Wanru alone. Yu Jie showed an angry expression on her face. Old madam was really too much. She actually put the blame on Miss, as if Miss couldn't do it, so she didn't try hard. Xiao Wanru still looked very calm. She was not surprised by old madam's outrageous behavior. She turned around and took Yu Jie out of the Chuntang courtyard unhurriedly and returned to the Piaoyun courtyard. Recently, everyone in the Piaoyun courtyard had been very busy preparing for Xiao Wanru's dowry. Several trusted servants were busy. Except for Yu Jie, who had to accompany Xiao Wanru, the others were so busy that they could hardly be seen. When Xiao Wanru came back, the Piaoyun courtyard was being tidied up with large pieces of furniture. Nanny Yu and a few rough old maids were carefully moving them out. Seeing Xiao Wanru coming over, Nanny Yu hurriedly came over and saluted. Then she reached out to point at the pile of large pieces of furniture and said, Miss, what do you think of these? Chapter 869. Remember in 1 second, 800 mail sign small/say net wonderful pop-up window free reading. Xiao Wanru nodded. In that case, I'll send someone over to move it. Great-grandmother has already sent someone over to ask if I'm ready, Nanny Yu said. The current affairs in the mansion were taken over by Zhao Shiran. After taking over, the most important thing was Xiao Wanru's marriage. These large pieces of furniture should be moved to Prince Chen's mansion today to decorate the newlyweds' rooms. This was also a part of a woman's dowry. Large items such as this kind of furniture could be sent over to be placed in the bridal chamber. He carefully walked around a large pile of furniture in the garden, went into the inner room, sat down, and ordered Yujie, "Bring me the Huasheng from yesterday." She felt that Ji Huasheng looked familiar, but she couldn't remember where she had seen him before. Yujie obeyed and brought Huasheng over. Xiao Wanru opened the brocade box and looked at it carefully again. It was very similar to the one in the Empress's box just now. However, upon closer inspection, there seemed to be some differences. It was obvious that the one in his hand was more exquisite, and the design was more ingenious. Every part of it was meticulously made, and there was a sense of nobility in it. The phoenix head swayed slightly, and the string of beads drooped down. With the slightest movement, beautiful fine lines rippled out, looking extremely alluring. She picked up Huasheng and compared it with her hair in the mirror. She still couldn't see anything, but there was a familiar feeling in her heart that she couldn't get rid of. He placed Huasheng on the table and looked at it carefully. Seeing that Xiao Wanru had been looking at the Huasheng carefully, Yujie also looked at it carefully, but just like Xiao Wanru, she didn't find anything. Seeing that Xiao Wanru had been staring at the Huasheng for so long, she couldn't help asking, "Miss, is there anything wrong with this Huasheng?" "There's nothing wrong." Xiao Wanru couldn't tell what she wanted to see. Anyway, she just felt that it was very familiar, as if she had seen it several times. But where? There seemed to be something in his mind, but when he thought about it carefully, it was empty, without any trace left behind. Where had he seen Ji Huasheng before? It was impossible in this life, so it must be in her last life. She had forgotten many things in her last life, so she didn't have the confidence to remember Ji Huasheng now. She carefully sorted out what had happened in her last life. She should have seen Ji Huasheng after entering the palace, but she was just a painter in the palace. Why did she see Ji Huasheng, especially Ji Huasheng should be a relic of Chu Liuchen's mother? She reached out and rubbed her eyebrows, and slowly closed her watery eyes. Her long eyelashes fluttered like a tired butterfly, leaving two uneven shadows on her white face. She thought about it, and thought, but still. Standing up, he walked to the window and looked out at the corner of the sky. In the distance, a tall building came into view. That was the courtyard where second uncle lived. Inexplicably, he remembered that his father had also moved things over there. Li Wanru, she thought. Her father had Ji Shi King had King of Shi had standing on the tall building and had looked around. Shi heart, time, Shi. Hua. Hu had and had Wang. Shi. Luan. She felt an inexplicable pain in her heart, and her eyes turned red. If her father and mother were still alive, they wouldn't have let her and her brother live such a difficult life. A child without parents was like duckweed and had no one to rely on. If she didn't become strong, her last life would be the last portrayal of her. Those so-called relatives would not only not help her, but also push her into a deeper abyss until her bones and blood were eaten up, making her doomed eternally. Xiao Wanru looked up slightly and fixed her eyes on the tall building. She looked at it with rapt attention, as if she could see her parents from that place. Ah! A scream suddenly came from the yard, interrupting Xiao Wanru's thoughts. She lowered her head and looked at the messy yard. It seemed that someone had been hit. Go and have a look. Yujie answered and went out into the crowd. After taking a look, she hurriedly turned back and reported, "Miss, an old maid's leg was crushed by a cabinet. But don't worry. Nanny Yu is dealing with it. It shouldn't be a big problem. I just took a look at it. It's okay." Yujie had learned medical skills, so she could tell at a glance that it was okay. Xiao Wanru nodded and narrowed her watery eyes slightly. When she was about to turn around and go back, she suddenly heard someone scream and someone fell down again. Xiao Wanru stood still and looked at the yard. There were many noisy and messy people. In a short time, there were two groups of people. Some were screaming in panic, and some were helping. It was a mess. Don't move things first. Save the person who was hit and let her go back to have a rest first. I'll deal with it later, Xiao Wanru said decisively. But, miss. Yujie wanted to say that it was too late to let her go back to have a rest since things were so urgent. Xiao Wanru waved her hand and said, it doesn't matter if she takes a rest for a while. Seeing that Xiao Wanru had made up her mind, Yujie helplessly turned around to inform Nanny Yu. Then she helped Nanny Yu get the two injured old maids out and carry them to the wing room to have a rest. The other servants let them go back to have a rest first. They had been busy since the morning and hadn't even had lunch yet. They had planned to move a few things outside the courtyard and have a rest. Now hearing that they were allowed to have lunch first, they all thanked Xiao Wanru profusely and left. Yujie came back after checking on the two old maids who had been hit. Miss, it's not a big deal. They just fell down and hit them when they accidentally moved the things. You didn't use lunch before? Xiao Wanru had just found out that these servants who moved the things didn't use lunch. It was already late for lunch at this time. I asked them just now. Originally, we agreed to let them have lunch after moving these big things out of the courtyard. But some of them look easy to move, but in fact, they are not easy to move at all. In addition, they have been moving for so long that their legs are weak and they don't have much strength. That's why they hit people. Yujie asked clearly just now and listened to Xiao Wanru's report. Xiao Wanru raised her eyebrows and asked lightly, who told us to do that before? It's the first grandma's servant. In order to ask them to work harder, the first grandma specially promised to give them more money. She said that the first grandma would give them more money after moving the things. Yujie said. Xiao Wanru slowly showed a smile, which was very beautiful, charming, and cold. Therefore, if something happened, it was her fault. Zhao Shiran had done a good job. No matter how one looked at it, it was very good. It was watertight. If she hadn't found out that Zhao Shiran had ulterior motives, she would probably think that Zhao Shiran was a good person. Not only did he wholeheartedly manage the business, but he also paid for it. Zhao Shiran had played too many tricks. Although he didn't cause any substantial harm to her, he was really annoying. Carry the two injured old maids to the Chihui courtyard. Tell them that the two old maids accidentally hit their feet and ask the first sister-in-law to diagnose them. No matter how much it costs, you can pay from me. Xiao Wanru said. Who didn't know how to be a disgusting person? Of course, she felt that it was more like Zhao Shiran's test, and she also gave Zhao Shiran a warning. No matter what Zhao Shiran's purpose was, he shouldn't treat her as a stepping stone. She couldn't be trampled on by others at will. If he wanted to be a good person and get the praise of the whole mansion, he could do that, but he shouldn't use others' reputation to help himself. Grandma, the two old maids sent by the fifth miss said that they were injured. Obviously, they were injured by her, and it was because of her. Why did she send them to us? Qiu Yu came in angrily and reported to Zhao Shiran. In the room, Zhao Shiran's face was not very good and a little gloomy. When she married into Marquis Xing's mansion, she had been prepared for it. In order to marry into Marquis Xing's mansion, she had even done some tricks in advance. However, she didn't expect that so many things would happen during her marriage. On the day of her marriage, she even lost the title of nobility of the Marquis's mansion, which looked very unlucky. After making a mistake, old madam of the mansion even vented her anger on her. Although she had gotten the supervisor's card now, it was difficult for her to get started for a while without someone's guidance. Moreover, the supervisor in the mansion was not very obedient when he saw her. Everyone knew that so many things had happened to her as soon as she married into Marquis Xing's mansion, so she would not be favored by the elders. Therefore, at this time, she had to be more patient. If possible, she was willing to join hands with others. Take her in and ask someone to take good care of her. Then ask a doctor to come over and have a look. Don't care about money. Be sure to cure her. Zhao Shiran ordered. Grandma, the people sent by the fifth miss said very nice words. They said that if you need money, you can go to the fifth miss for it. However, they just said such words and didn't send anything substantial. Who doesn't know how to say nice words? Chiu Yu curled her lips and said angrily. In front of so many servants, the people of the Piaoyun courtyard said nice words, and the two injured old maids repeatedly expressed their gratitude to the fifth Mississippi. It was her grandma who did it, but in the end, the thanks fell on the fifth Mississippi. Chiu Yu was very unconvinced. Grandma had just entered Marquis Xing's mansion and encountered such a big event. She really needed a good reputation to support her. Why did the fifth miss rob her grandma's good reputation at this time? Don't care about these things. It's Madam of the Prime Minister's birthday in a few days. Have you prepared all the gifts? In the face of the servant girl's anger, Zhao Shiran was very calm. She had long known that the fifth Miss Xiao was not simple. Now it seemed that she was extraordinary. It seemed that she had to be more careful. It's all ready, but why did Grandma take out the good things in her dowry and send them over? Originally, this kind of thing should be prepared by old Madam. Thinking of this, Chiu Yu felt very angry. Which new bride gave her dowry as soon as she married? She said that the Madam of the Prime Minister's birthday should not be inferior to Madam of the Prime Minister's. She also said that many things in the mansion had been given to the fifth miss as her dowry and there was nothing special. Didn't she force Grandma to take out her own dowry? Fortunately, Grandma had a good temper. Otherwise, she would not be able to bear it at this time. Chiu Yu felt more and more indignant for her master. Chapter 870. Zhao Shiran didn't mind and smiled. His expression was very gentle. No matter how good the dowry is, it's just sitting there. Picking one or two decent pieces to give out will bring glory to everyone. There's no need to be so calculative. Before Chiu Yu could finish her sentence, she suddenly saw the curtain at the door open. Xiao Huan walked in. He had just walked out of the door and happened to hear what Zhao Shiran said. He was full of humility. After entering the door, he waved his hand and Chiu Yu left. Shiran, I'm sorry to trouble you. Xiao Huan walked to her side and sat down. He stretched out his hand and held her hand. Marrying Zhao Shiran was also his idea. To be able to marry the person he liked, he was extremely happy. However, this happiness was now greatly reduced because the High Duke's public house had been demoted to a Marquis' public house. It was no longer as happy as he had imagined. Fortunately, Zhao Shiran was a virtuous person. She did not make a fuss after saying that she wanted to go back. She also focused on managing the family affairs. She knew that her grandmother was making things difficult for her. Xiao Huan knew that she could not cook without rice. He took out a key from his pocket and placed it in Zhao Shiran's hand. This is the key to my private storage. If you lack anything, you can take it yourself. I let you take charge of the house when you just entered the house. It's because there are no useful people in the house. It's really hard on you. Husband. I don't want it. You can keep it for yourself. Zhao Shiran blushed and pushed the key to Xiao Huan. What's mine is not yours. You can use it. If you need anything else, you can tell me. I can't let you keep using your dowry. Xiao Huan's voice became gentler. He held Zhao Shiran's hand tightly inside. I'll help you get back at them in the future. His words were very affectionate and sincere. Zhao Shiran's face became even redder. After all, she was still a newlywed. She could not help but feel shy when he said such affectionate words. Her appearance pleased Xiao Huan. He reached out and held her in his arms. He patted her back gently and said, Shiran, I finally marry you. Such a gentle attitude made Zhao Shiran soften her body involuntarily and close her eyes slightly. Now that she was married, she was not only the first miss of the Zhao family, but also the wife of the first young master of Marquis Xing's mansion. What do you think about the list I prepared? This is the first time I manage the family affairs of the Marquis' mansion. Grandma and third aunt are not willing to help me. After a long while, Zhao Shiran stretched out her hand and pushed Xiao Huan's shoulder gently. Okay. Seeing that she was so gentle and considerate, Xiao Huan's heart ached even more. After he let go of Zhao Shiran, he took the list from Zhao Shiran and looked at the things on the list. He nodded as he read, deeply feeling that he had married a good wife. I matter, a wife. Good wife. Xian's words, not true. Good, he, too. She was so talented that she could do a good job even without anyone's help. Everything else is fine. You just need to increase the amount of gifts. Our two mansions are neighbors, and our families have been on good terms for so many years. Our children grew up together when we were young, so our relationship isn't like that of other families, Xiao Huan pointed out after reading through the mansions. Zhao Shiran agreed one by one and picked up a pen to add a few gifts on the spot. Xiao Huan looked at them and felt that everything was in order. He then nodded and said, "That's good. You can show them to Grandma later. If Grandma is not satisfied with them, you can change these to something of the same value. These don't look very festive, and the meaning is not so good." Xiao Huan pointed at some gifts on the list. Zhao Shiran wrote them down. They talked for a while. Xiao Huan left after being summoned by the servant sent by Xiao Jing. The list fell on the table again. Zhao Shiran thought for a while and copied the list again. She changed all the gifts that Xiao Huan had pointed out to her. As expected, the value of the gifts didn't change much. However, all the gifts were suitable for older people and had the best meaning. Qiu Yu came in with a cup of tea. Send this list to the fifth miss and ask her to comment on it for me and see if I need to change anything. Tell her that I have just arrived at Marquis Xing's mansion and know nothing about it, but I can't find anyone to ask, so I want to trouble the fifth miss to have a look. Zhao Shiran put down the pen in his hand and ordered. Grandma, you are the sister-in-law of the fifth Mississippi. Now you are the housekeeper. How can you show it to the fifth miss? Old Madam and the third Madam are the elders. Even the third miss and the fourth miss are a little older than the fifth Mississippi. I heard that the fifth miss was born in a poor family. Qiu Yu was very dissatisfied with Xiao Wanru because of what happened just now. She blurted out a lot of words. Shut up. Zhao Shiran's face darkened. Miss, Qiu Yu felt extremely aggrieved. What kind of place is this? Who is the fifth miss? How can she allow a maid like you to ruin her? If the fifth miss really wants to take your life, I won't be able to protect you just because of what you just said. Zhao Shiran said coldly, this is not the mansion of the Minister of State, and I am not the first Miss Xiao. I am now the wife of the first young master of Marquis Xing's mansion. Zhao Shiran said almost word by word with a bit of sharpness in her eyes. The two servant girls around her had been excellent, but now she found that she had valued them too much in the past, so that the two servant girls dared to say anything. Xiao Wanru was not easy to deal with, so she could only make friends with her now. Yes. I overstepped my bounds. Qiu Yu knelt down with a sense of grievance, but she did not dare to refute. Well, you can leave now. Tell the fifth miss to help you with the review. If you have any opinions, come back and tell me. Zhao Shiran's face softened. Yes, first Grandma. Seeing that she had really annoyed Zhao Shiran, Qiu Yu did not dare to say anything more. She hurriedly answered, picked up the dried gift list, and left. Xiao Wanru was very surprised by this gift list. No matter from which aspect, Zhao Shiran should not show this gift list to her. First sister, this gift list is very good. I really can't see anything wrong with it. In fact, I know nothing about the housekeeping. If you are worried, you can show it to Grandma. Xiao Wanru said to Qiu Yu with a smile and asked Yujie to pass the gift list to Qiu Yu. Our Grandma means that fifth miss should have a look at it anyway. If there is anything wrong or taboo, please give us some advice. Our Grandma has just entered the mansion, so there are many things she doesn't know, and she doesn't know what is wrong with it. At this time, Qiu Yu, who had been angry before, had already made it clear in one breath with a smile. Yujia handed the gift list in her hand to her and said with a smile, "It's good. Our miss thinks it's good and there is nothing to improve. In fact, our miss has just returned to the mansion. Compared with other misses, she really doesn't know the specific affairs in the mansion." Of course, she meant that Zhao Shiran had asked the wrong person. How could Xiao Wanru, who had just returned to the mansion, know all kinds of taboos and what they cared about in the mansion? Fortunately, they were just going through the motions. After the two servant girls pushed it a few more times, Chiu Yu picked up the gift list and went back to report to Zhao Shiran. "Miss, what is first grandma doing? Why did she show you this gift list? It has nothing to do with you, right?" Yujie rubbed her little face, which was stiff from laughing. Just now, she pushed Chiu Yu and laughed so hard that her teeth almost fell down. In fact, it was really fake. "It's for others to see." Xiao Wanru slightly raised the corner of her mouth. She really couldn't like this sister-in-law, who had malicious intentions towards her as soon as she entered the mansion. Just now, she just glanced at her casually and didn't pay much attention to her. "Miss, why do we have to go to the Wen's mansion again this time? Didn't you say that we don't have to go? Why do we suddenly have to go there again and ask us to go with first grandma?" Yujia asked curiously. This was the news that old madam's old maid had sent to inform them just now. Xiao Wanru was about to get married, and time was tight. Old madam's original intention was to let her refuse many invitations. Except for the banquet in the palace, she had to stay in the mansion to prepare for the dowry and other things. Maybe the relationship between the two mansions is really good. Xiao Wanru said vaguely and looked out of the window. After being reborn, was she going to enter the Wen's mansion again? She had thought that her mood would fluctuate, but now she found that she was as calm as water. She was really very calm without any ripples. In the last life, she entered the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion in the name of happiness. Later, because her lips were too bright, she was reprimanded by Madam of the Deputy Prime Minister in the morning hall and then driven away. It was a rainy day that day. The cold autumn rain fell, and her clothes were all wet. She was cold and hungry, but she had no one to rely on. Thinking of it now, it seemed that it was a lifetime ago. She closed her eyes slightly. At that time, she almost lost her soul. She had no home to return to, no relatives to rely on, and she was alone in the vast world. When passers-by on the road saw her wet, they pointed at her and ridiculed her. She bit her lip hard, and the sharp pain made her sober for a while. It also made her clearly know that she was Xiao Wanru now, not the Xiao Yenru who had no one to rely on in the last life. She slowly opened her eyes, which were stained with a little red, and her eyes were cold and sharp. Then she slowly calmed down, with a sneer on her lips without any warmth. After being reborn, many things were different from the last life. In this life, she was herself, and Wenshichi was Wenshichi. After repaying Wenshichi's kindness in the last life, she would not have much interaction with the Wen's mansion in this life. In fact, it was not so difficult to enter the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion again. Chapter 871. Old Madam originally said that she would not go to the Prime Minister's mansion, but later she decided to go with Xiao Kailing, Xiao Wanru, and Zhao Shiran, his new daughter-in-law. Although the two mansions were very close, they still got in the carriages. Marquis Xing's mansion prepared 2 carriages. Xiao Wanru and Old Madam sat in the front carriage, and Zhao Shiran and Xiao Kailing sat in the back carriage. After getting in the carriages, they arrived at the Prime Minister's mansion after a turn. They were the first to arrive, so they entered the Prime Minister's mansion without waiting for long. The men stayed in the living room outside, and the women went to the inner door. Hearing that Old Madam was coming, Madam of the Prime Minister had been waiting at the Chuehua gate early. The relationship between the two mansions had always been good. Although they seldom contacted each other because Old Madam was not in charge of affairs, they had a good relationship after so many years. Madam of the Prime Minister was a beautiful middle-aged woman who was dressed very elegantly. When she saw Old Madam coming, she hurriedly came up to her with a smile. After a little greeting, old Madam looked at a beautiful girl behind Madam of the Prime Minister and said, "This girl looks a little familiar." "Old Madam, have you forgotten that this is my niece, Shishu, who used to play with several misses in your mansion?" Madam of the Prime Minister introduced with a smile. "Ah. Oh, yes, I am dim-sighted. Yes, she is Sister Shu from your mansion. I haven't seen her for a long time. I didn't expect that she has become so beautiful like a flower. Madam Wen is really good at raising people. You have raised your niece so well." Old Madam suddenly realized and said with a smile. "Old Madam, you are too polite. How can the misses in your mansion be as beautiful as a flower? Isn't this the 5th Miss Xiao?" Madam of the Prime Minister's eyes fell on several women behind old Madam. She had met Zhao Shiran, and Xiao Kailing was also very familiar with them. Only Zhao Shiran was not familiar with Xiao Wanru. She was an elegant and charming girl with delicate and beautiful facial features and bright watery eyes. However, when she looked up at others, she gave people a kind of misty feeling. She was so beautiful that she was a little unreal. Madam of the Prime Minister couldn't help praising her in her heart. Madam of the Prime Minister had seen Xiao Yanru's beauty, and she had always thought that no woman could surpass Xiao Yanru. Now, seeing the 5th Miss Xiao, she realized that there was always someone better than her in the world. Speaking of which, Marquis Xing's mansion was really blessed by nature. There was already such a beautiful 1st Miss Xiao. Unexpectedly, the 5th Miss Xiao, who had returned to the family, was another stunning beauty. However, it was a pity that the 1st Miss Xiao had died. It was unknown whether the 5th Miss Xiao was a beautiful woman with a short life. "Wanru, come and meet Madam Wen." Old Madam waved to Xiao Wanru and said. Xiao Wanru took a step forward and bowed to Madam of the Prime Minister respectfully. Good girl. You are really beautiful and polite. Old Madam's granddaughter is really well educated." Madam of the Prime Minister nodded repeatedly. She reached out to take a bracelet from her hand and put it on Xiao Wanru's hand. "I didn't prepare anything good today. This jade bracelet is good. I'll give it to you as a gift for our first meeting." "Thank you, Madam Wen Xiang." Old Madam said happily. Xiao Wanru thanked her and stepped aside. Gu Shishu stood beside her and stared at her fiercely as if she was going to eat her. There was almost uncontrollable hatred in her eyes. Xiao Wanru looked into Gu Shishu's eyes indifferently and then smiled slightly. She didn't understand why Gu Shishu was so excited to see her. The conflict a few years ago had been a long time ago, and it was still a trivial matter. Even if Gu Shishu didn't grow up, it was impossible for her to bear a grudge for so long. However, Gu Shishu's expression really surprised her. There was shock, resentment, and hatred in Gu Shishu's eyes when she looked at her. Fortunately, Gu Shishu gradually controlled her emotions and calmed down. Then her expression returned to normal. After the juniors greeted each other, Madam of the Prime Minister personally welcomed old Madam and walked inside. Several juniors followed behind and listened to their conversation while walking inside. Xiao Wanru was the youngest and fell behind at the end. Gu Shishu didn't know when she came to her side. "5th Miss Xiao, it's the first time you've come to our mansion, right? Why don't I accompany you to enjoy the scenery later?" Gu Shishu said with a smile, as if Xiao Wanru's malicious stare just now was an illusion. "Thank you for your kindness, Miss Gu." Xiao Wanru said with a slight smile. "Don't stand on ceremony, 5th Mississippi. You're the guest today, and I'm the host." Gu Shimei said softly, as if she was referring to something. However, Xiao Wanru was not interested in her affairs, so she just smiled politely and did not continue the topic. "Miss Gu, are you?" Xiao Caihuan took over the topic. They had played together when they were young, and they were good friends. Later, Xiao Caihuan had some understanding of Gu Shishu's mind. But there were so many people here, so Xiao Caihuan couldn't say anything in person, so she just mentioned it a little. Gu Shishu blushed, stretched out her hand to pull the handkerchief in her hand, and bit her lip. Her shy and timid look showed that there was a story behind it. Is Miss Gu engaged to the second young master? Zhao Shiran was well informed. After looking at old madam and madam of the Prime Minister who was talking enthusiastically, he lowered his voice and said. Engaged? Wasn't she going to be a concubine? Xiao Wanru raised her eyebrows, and there was a trace of deepness in her watery eyes. It hasn't been finalized yet. Gu Shishu said in a voice as small as an ant's, and her face had turned red. Miss Gu, I'm sorry. I thought it had been finalized. Zhao Shiran hurriedly apologized. First Grandma Xiao, you're welcome. Gu Shishu said in a sweet voice. She looked at Xiao Wanru with a blushing face and looked a little proud, which made Xiao Wanru feel confused. She didn't know why Gu Shishu was so proud of her. She didn't have anything to do with Gu Shishu. The flower hall was not far from the Chuehua gate. Old Madam and Madam of the Prime Minister did not stop them and asked Gu Shishu to accompany them to walk around. Zhao Shiran didn't leave. She said that she would accompany Old Madam and asked Xiao Kailing and Xiao Wanru to play with Gu Shishu. Zhao Shiran's behavior immediately won Madam of the Prime Minister's praise. She nodded repeatedly and said that Old Madam had married a good granddaughter-in-law. The daughter of Minister Zhao's mansion was extremely educated and reasonable. Old Madam didn't like Zhao Shiran very much. At this time, she also put on a loving expression on her face. She was polite and modest while looking at Zhao Shiran with satisfaction, as if she was really very satisfied with Zhao Shiran. Xiao Kailing also didn't want to leave. The third branch was not living a good life now. Before going out, the third madam had repeatedly asked her to please Old Madam. Seeing that Zhao Shiran's trick worked, she immediately moved to the other side of Old Madam, indicating that she was worried about Old Madam and didn't want to go out. There were only 4 people in total. Neither of them wanted to go out and wanted to please Old Madam. Xiao Wanru also sat down beside Xiao Kailing. Fifth Miss Xiao, you haven't been to our mansion yet, have you? It happens that Shishu has nothing to do, so I can accompany you for a walk and let you know the way. Seeing Xiao Wanru also sit down, Madam of the Prime Minister suggested with a smile. Fifth Miss Xiao, shall we go for a walk together? It's your first time to come to our mansion. If I don't treat you well, my aunt will blame me. Fifth Miss Xiao, you won't make things difficult for me, right? Gu Shishu came over affectionately and reached out to pull Xiao Wanru up. Xiao Wanru stood up, stepped back, and happened to avoid Gu Shishu's hand. Thank you, Miss Gu. She couldn't refuse Madam of the Prime Minister's reason. It was true that she was the only one present who had never been to the Prime Minister's mansion. Madam of the Prime Minister's arrangement was very reasonable. Aunt, then I'll take Fifth Miss Xiao out for a walk. Gu Shishu said to Madam of the Prime Minister with a smile, as if she didn't notice Xiao Wanru's indifference to her. Madam of the Prime Minister nodded with a smile and teased, don't go too far. You will come back soon. If you are tired, come back early. There will be snacks to eat later. If you come late, there will be no more. Aunt. Gu Shishu stamped her feet unwillingly and said, when you say that, everyone will think that I am a good eater. Aren't you a good eater? Madam of the Prime Minister laughed, and Old Madam couldn't help laughing. Fifth Miss Xiao, let's go first. We will come back after a while, in case we finish all the good ones. Gu Shishu blushed because of the laughter. She leaned over to Xiao Wanru and said affectionately. Okay, go ahead. Madam of the Prime Minister waved her hand with a smile. It could be seen that she liked this niece very much. The smile on Old Madam's face also faded. Gu Shishu in front of her reminded her of Madam of Jiang, who also grew up before her. She also wanted Madam of Jiang to marry into her family and become her favorite daughter-in-law, but in the end, she fell into such a situation. Thinking of it now, Old Madam didn't know what was wrong with Madam of Jiang, who made mistakes one after another. Xiao Wanru bowed to Old Madam and then left after Gu Shishu. After walking out of the door of the flower hall, Gu Shishu pointed to a path ahead on the right and said, Fifth Miss Xiao, shall we go there for a walk? The scenery over there is very good. Looking in that direction, Xiao Wanru's eyes became a little gloomy. She frowned slightly, but then she relaxed and said, "It's up to you, Miss Gu." She naturally meant that she had never been here, so she could let Gu Shishu make the decision no matter where they went. "Okay, let's go there from here." Gu Shishu nodded with a smile. The two of them talked about the scenery all the way as if they had never seen each other before. Xiao Wanru was actually very familiar with this road. In her last life, she could walk this road several times a day. In the backyard of the Prime Minister's mansion, this was the only place that Xiao Wanru was most familiar with. If this place had not been changed, the place that the road led to was really very familiar, the courtyard where Shichi lived. The Prime Minister's only daughter died early, and he only had 3 sons. As for other concubines, the Prime Minister didn't have many, so several large courtyards in the backyard were reserved for his 3 sons. Shichi was the Prime Minister's most beloved son. He was less talented and the most favored. He occupied a large courtyard at the end of this road. She walked forward calmly and wanted to see what Gu Shishu wanted to do by pretending to be obedient. At an intersection, Gu Shishu stopped with a smile, reached out and pointed ahead. "That's my third cousin's courtyard. Let's not go there for fear of bumping into him. He is a little elusive. Who knows if he is here or not? Fifth Miss Xiao, let's go this way." The way she pointed was not to Shichi's courtyard. It seemed that she really didn't want to bump into Shichi. If someone else said this, Xiao Wanru might believe it, but Gu Shishu. Xiao Wanru raised her lips and said with a hint of coldness in her graceful posture, "Miss Gu, just lead the way." Chapter 872. The weather had gradually warmed up, especially today, which was a sunny day. If it wasn't for the windshield, it should be warm. There were not many flowers in early spring, but along the way, there were many trees that had been green by the spring breeze, which were no longer as withered and dilapidated as they used to be. Xiao Wanru looked at the courtyard in front of her with a frown. It was a very simple courtyard, even more so than the other places, as if it had a simple and unadorned aura. Unlike the other luxurious buildings in the mansion, this was just a simple little courtyard. The door was also a very simple gate. Opening the gate, one could see 3 simple rooms. "What is this place?" Xiao Wanru stopped. "This is the study. Let me show you something good." Gu Shishu said with a smile and reached out to push Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru was caught off guard and almost fell. Yujia hurriedly took 2 steps forward to protect Xiao Wanru and looked at Gu Shishu with vigilance. "Fifth Miss Xiao, are you afraid?" Gu Shishu raised her eyebrows, raised her chin, and said with a sneer. "What am I afraid of? Could it be that Miss Gu has hidden something that can't be seen here?" Xiao Wanru gently pushed Yujia away and said with a cold face. "It is indeed something that can't be seen, but I didn't hide it. Fifth Miss Xiao, you are so scheming. You seduce Prince Chen and my third cousin at the same time." Gu Shishu looked at Xiao Wanru with jealousy and hatred. She had tried so hard but failed to get it. How could Xiao Wanru get it so easily? "What did you say?" Xiao Wanru's face darkened. She didn't understand Gu Shishu's words, but her meaning shocked her. "Fifth Miss Xiao, don't you understand? You are really good at pretending. There is no one else here. You'd better say it directly." Gu Shishu was angry and resentful. Thinking of the painting she saw, she was about to explode with anger. What belonged to her belonged to her. If someone snatched it, she would rather destroy it if she couldn't get it. Her third cousin was the person she had set her mind on when she entered the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion, but now this person was getting farther and farther away from her. As long as she thought of this, she would gnash her teeth in anger. She was the one who was third cousin's childhood sweetheart. She was the one who grew up with third cousin and accompanied him until now. Why did third cousin's heart belong to someone else? Originally, she felt that the woman in the painting looked familiar, but she couldn't remember who she was at the moment. Later, after thinking of all the outstanding women she had seen in her mind, she found that this person was a little bit like the fifth Miss Xiao of Duke Xing's mansion. Gu Shishu had a good memory. When she saw Xiao Wanru at the beginning, Xiao Wanru didn't look like this. She still looked like a childish child, but there were some things that couldn't be changed. Xiao Wanru had delicate and beautiful facial features and pure and charming watery eyes. Of course, Gu Shishu also had doubts, but this doubt disappeared when she saw Xiao Wanru today. Yes, this was Xiao Wanru, the current Xiao Wanru, not the former Xiao Wanru. But how could it be her? That was why Gu Shishu was so shocked when she first saw Xiao Wanru. Why was it her? When did third cousin become so familiar with her? Why didn't she know? Moreover, she had never heard of this matter from others. What are you talking about? Can Miss Gu say whatever she wants? If you wish to incriminate someone, you can always find a pretext. Xiao Wanru, however, calmed down. Her watery eyes fell on Gu Shishu's envious and ferocious face, and she said with a slight smile. You, how dare you deny it? The calmer Xiao Wanru was, the angrier Gu Shishu became. She pointed at Xiao Wanru and scolded loudly. Miss Gu, don't talk nonsense if you don't have evidence. Our miss is going to marry into Prince Chen's mansion soon. Nobody can talk nonsense. Yujie glared at Gu Shishu and said. Just now, the young miss was almost pushed down by her. Gu Shishu's maid also stepped forward to protect her master, stood in front of Yujie, and said, How dare you? Our miss is talking nonsense. Is your Mrs. Maid the same as my Mrs. Maid? Yujie looked the maid up and down with disdain. You. Gu Shishu's servant girl couldn't argue with her. She was so angry that she wanted to fight, but she was stopped by Gu Shishu. Xiao Wanru, you won't shed tears until you see the coffin, right? Well, I'll let you die knowing now. Come with me. Gu Shishu said with a sneer. She turned around and walked inside. After a few steps, she turned back and said, Xiao Wanru, don't tell me that you don't even dare to look at it. If you don't dare to look at it, I'll take the painting out later and show it to all the guests today. I'll let everyone know what kind of person you are and see if Prince Chen still wants to marry you. After saying that, she angrily walked to the main room. Xiao Wanru thought for a while and followed her fearlessly. The door of the main room was originally tightly closed. Gu Shishu took out a key, opened the door, and went inside to have a look. It turned out that this was not the main room for people to live in, but a study. The books inside were arranged in rows. The so-called 3 rooms were actually the side rooms on both sides of the main room that were connected to each other. Gu Shishu led Xiao Wanru to the side room on the left. There was a large writing desk against the wall, on which there were all kinds of writing brushes, ink, paper, and inkstones. There was also a large painting jar on the side with a few paintings in it. Gu Shishu walked to the front of the painting jar, took out a painting from the back, and then handed it to Xiao Wanru coldly and said, Look at it yourself. Don't say that you don't know who this person is. Even if she is a little different, so what? It's just that third cousin wants to cover it up. Anyone who sees it will know that it's you. Trying to cover it up makes things worse. Xiao Wanru took the painting scroll and frowned unconsciously. She walked to the table in front of the window, slowly opened the painting scroll, and then spread it flat on the table. When he saw the woman in the painting clearly, his expression changed. The woman in the painting was none other than, it was her. Yujie originally thought that Gu Shishu was talking nonsense. Now that she saw the face of the woman in the painting clearly, she widened her eyes in shock and was so surprised that she couldn't speak for a while. This was obviously Miss, wasn't it? Don't tell me that you don't know the woman in the painting, or that the woman in the painting is someone else. Xiao Wanru, I didn't expect you to be such a person. You and third cousin secretly. You. Gu Shishu pointed at the painting with a livid face. Her eyes were full of hatred, as if when Shichi had originally belonged to her. Xiao Wanru, believe it or not, I will show this painting to everyone later and let you feel that you have lost your reputation. You want to marry my third cousin? Just give up. Even if you lose your reputation and have no choice but to come to our mansion, you will at most be a concubine. Moreover, you will be a concubine below me. I can torture you however I want. Gu Shishu's eyes turned red with anger. Xiao Wanru ignored her and looked at the file. It was very familiar. Everything was very familiar, whether it was the clothes, the expression, or even the surrounding environment. Everything was very familiar, as if it was right in front of her. When she looked again, she felt as if she was dreaming. She stroked the face of the woman in the painting with slightly trembling fingers. For a moment, the hatred that she thought had disappeared in her bones and blood was so easily aroused. The woman in the painting stood in the corridor, followed by a servant girl far behind. It was not Yujie, but another servant girl. She remembered that this servant girl was a servant girl assigned by the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion. She was quite loyal, but even such a loyal servant girl failed to protect her. Because she accidentally bumped into Gu Shishu, the second madam of the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion, she was severely beaten 20 times. When Xiao Wanru learned the news and went to find Gu Shishu had already gone to play. The servants in the mansion did not let Xiao Wanru go. When Gu Shishu came back after playing, the servant girl was already dead. It was raining in the painting, and the rain was falling. She looked up at the rain with a sad and lonely look. She pursed her lips tightly with bitterness and helplessness. Her eyes seemed to fall on the rain, but also seemed to penetrate the rain and fall on an unknown place. There was another person at the end of the corridor. Xiao Wanru could not see clearly who he was. However, judging from the color of his clothes and the thin figure, even though his face was blurred, Xiao Wanru could guess that he was Wenshichi, who was too sick to get up at that time. He seemed to be standing at the window of that room, quietly looking at Xiao Wanru in the corridor with a sad face. Some memories seemed to come to her mind. She entered the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion in the name of getting married and was looked down upon by all the people in the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion. It was okay in Wenshichi's own courtyard. As for the servants in other mansions, they did not treat her as a master at all. When they saw her, they were neither warm nor cold, and few people paid attention to her instructions. Even if she did it herself, few people would pay attention to her, not to mention that she asked a servant girl to do it. At that time, when Shichi was in such poor health, so Xiao Wanru did not dare to bother him with this kind of thing at all. She just wanted him to take good care of his illness. If anything happened, Xiao Wanru would try her best to deal with it by herself. At that time, she was sensitive and timid because of inferiority complex. She really could not think of a way, so she could only stand alone in the corridor and suffer miserably. This painting was of her in the last life, which looked a little bigger than the current one. But why was there such a painting? Did Wenshichi think of something? Where did this come from? Xiao Wanru heard herself asking calmly. Her voice sounded a little distant, as if it did not come from her. It was very far away and unreal. How dare you ask where it came from? Of course, it was painted by third cousin. Don't tell me that you don't think this person is you. Even though third cousin used some tricks to make people feel that the person in the painting is a little older than you, so what? Anyone who sees it will know that it is you. Miss Gu, you are wrong. This is not me. Xiao Wanru said lightly, this is the courtyard of the mansion, right? Is this the servant girl of the mansion? I have never been here. How could there be such a scene? Xiao Wanru slowly stroked the corridor above with her fingers. The servant girl above had a hard life with her in the last life. In this life, it had nothing to do with her. Gu Shishu would not deal with this servant girl and kill her. In fact, it would be the best for her. Chapter 873. It's not you. Xiao Wanru, you are deceiving me. If it's not you, who could it be? Well, you don't want to admit it, do you? I'll take this painting out now and let others see it. Gu Shishu was so angry that she reached out to take the painting away and said angrily. Xiao Wanru did not stop her. Instead, she took a step back and said with a cold look, "That's just right. I also want to ask who it is. If it's not me, who could it be? But if it's me, how could the third young master in the painting be in a void scene? Besides, I'm not so old. Could it be that the third young master one has a pair of eyes that can see through the future?" Xiao Wanru's calm look made Gu Shishu hesitate. She glanced at Xiao Wanru and found that Xiao Wanru looked too calm, as if it had nothing to do with her. But did it really have nothing to do with her? Gu Shishu lowered her head and looked at it carefully. The more she looked at it, the more confused she became. She looked at Xiao Wanru and then at Yujie behind Xiao Wanru. Her original conviction was shaken. At this time, should Xiao Wanru rush over in a hurry and snatch or tear the painting in a panic? She was really not afraid that Xiao Wanru would tear the painting. As long as Xiao Wanru tore the painting, it would show that the person in it was indeed her. There were 2 paintings painted by her third cousin. She did not take out the other one. After tearing this one, there was still another one. She was really not afraid of tearing it. But how could Xiao Wanru be so calm? "It's not you." "Of course it's not me. If Miss Gu doesn't believe it, you can take it out and ask others. But if it's not me, I'm afraid that your mansion will be in trouble. After all, the marriage between me and Prince Chen is the Empress Dowager's decree. Does the third young master of your mansion insinuate something by painting such a person?" Xiao Wanru slowly tidied up her clothes and looked at Gu Shishu leisurely. She looked more and more calm, but the meaning of her words made Gu Shishu's face change. If the Empress Dowager's decree was not what she guessed, not only would her third cousin be punished, but she, the initiator who took out the painting, would also be in trouble. "If it's not you, who else could it be?" Gu Shishu said, unconvinced, but her confidence was a little weaker. "How would I know? Miss Gu, please tell me who he is. Why does he look like me so much? Is he related to me by blood? If it is true, does this woman have anything to do with Marquis Xing or Rui and Great Elder Princess? Could it be that I have a sister?" Xiao Wanru said with a cold look, "Miss Gu, leave the painting to me. I'm going to see my grandma. The royal bloodline can't be mixed." Seeing that Xiao Wanru did not panic but became cold, Gu Shishu panicked. She hurriedly stood in front of the desk and blocked Xiao Wanru. "Fifth Miss Xiao, I can't give you this painting. It belongs to third cousin. I don't know who he painted, but no matter what, it belongs to third cousin. You, you, I. You even pointed at the painting and said it was mine. Let's just say that this painting is mine. Can you give it to me now?" Xiao Wanru said impatiently and took a step forward to pull Gu Shimei. Gu Shimei stopped her tightly and shouted anxiously, "Who said that it's you? How could it be you? You don't look the same. You are obviously older than you. My third cousin is not familiar with you. How could it be you?" Xiao Wanru's attitude turned the last trace of doubt into ashes. It was not Xiao Wanru. It was definitely not Xiao Wanru. Looking at it carefully, she did not look like Xiao Wanru. Moreover, Xiao Wanru had always looked calm. When did she become so sad? There were many people who looked alike in this world, but how could Xiao Wanru be? Although they looked alike, their temperament and expressions were different. The more Gu Shishu thought about it, the more she regretted it. If third cousin knew that she had touched his things, he would definitely ask his aunt to punish her. In fact, she just wanted to trick Xiao Wanru and then think of a way to use Xiao Wanru. It really wasn't me. Or someone who has a relationship with me. Xiao Wanru stood still and did not move forward. Her eyes were cold and sharp, as if she didn't believe Gu Shishu's words. It's really not fifth Miss Xiao, and it's impossible for it to be related to fifth Miss Xiao. It's impossible for Infanta Qinghua to have another daughter. Gu Shishu only hoped that Xiao Wanru would not take away the painting. Otherwise, she would not be able to hide it. She explained these words to Xiao Wanru, and the more she said, the more convinced she was that she was really wrong before and that she had been deceived. Since it's not her, forget it. Xiao Wanru said with flagging interest. She turned around and walked out, looking uninterested. Seeing that Xiao Wanru did not come up to snatch it again, Gu Shishu secretly breathed a sigh of relief. With lingering fear, she carefully rolled the painting and put it in the painting jar. After cleaning up, she looked around and found that she had not missed anything. Then she came out with her servant girl. Xiao Wanru had been standing in the yard for a while. Seeing Gu Shishu come out, she raised her feet and walked out. Gu Shishu hurriedly followed her, looking a little timid. She was no longer as domineering and confident as before. In terms of status, her status naturally couldn't be compared with Xiao Wanru's. Without the self-righteous control over her, she unconsciously felt weak in front of Xiao Wanru. After the two of them left, when Shichi appeared behind a pine tree in the back corner of the yard. With his hands clasped behind his back, he looked at the backs of the people who were going away. His eyes were deep, and there seemed to be thousands of thoughts in them. He stood there fixedly, giving people a sense of loneliness. Young master. Seeing that he stood there and watched for a long time without moving, the servant couldn't help calling him and reminding him, "Cousin Miss has left." The servant also felt strange. In the past, the third young master didn't treat Cousin Miss well. Why did he seem to like Cousin Miss so much today? If so, why did the third young master not react at all when Cousin Miss came to please him before and even looked a little cold and displeased? What was it now? Cousin Miss was about to marry the second young master and become the third young master's sister-in-law. Was the third young master reluctant to let her go? The servant scratched his head and felt confused. If there is a person who keeps appearing in my dream, what is the reason? When Shichi said in a low voice. It seemed that he was talking to himself, with some confusion that even he didn't understand. When he came in just now, he heard that there were people in the room, not only Gu Shishu but also Xiao Wanru. Inexplicably, he thought of hiding. He had a feeling that he wanted to secretly check on Xiao Wanru. Wasn't it her? It was obviously her. How could it not be her? But the memory in the dream seemed to be different from the one in front of him. The woman in the dream was sad, so sad that he felt sorry for her. He wanted to try his best to protect her, but he seemed to be ill in the dream. Even he needed her to take care of him, so how could he take care of her? It was a feeling of heartache. This feeling was even more intense than when he was awake. The woman in his dream made his heart ache, but he could only look at her from afar. He was powerless to help her. He knew that even if he helped her temporarily, it would be even more difficult for her in the future. If he was gone, what would happen to her? He had begged his mother, but his mother said in front of him that she was good to him, but in fact, she had always been indifferent to him. He put his hand on the tree trunk, but his heart ached. The woman in the dream was her, but it seemed that she was not in the same place as her. That feeling was very mysterious. It was as if he knew it was her, but he couldn't find any evidence. Moreover, the person in the painting was a little different from her. It seemed to be a woman in his memory, deeply imprinted in his heart. Now she came in front of him, but she was different from the one in his memory. So she was her. Originally, he thought that his dreams would fade, and there was even a period of time when he didn't think about them, but he didn't expect them to become more and more intense recently. Almost every dream was about her, but in every dream, she was sad, timid, and panicked. Every scene made his heart wrench in pain. He exerted force, and the rough branches made him slowly wake up. So what if it was her? So what if it wasn't her? She was about to marry Prince Chen and become his princess. Moreover, there was a more unbearable part in his heart. He had helped Prince Yu, almost ruined her reputation, and even lost her life. What right did he have to paint her? Turning back to the main room, the manservant hurriedly took out the key and opened the door. After entering the room, he looked at the painting jar and pondered for a while. Then he took out 2 paintings from it, tore them into pieces, and threw them into the basin beside him. The clear water slowly became muddy, and the clear paper became blurred. However, in his dream, the figure of the woman became clearer and clearer. He had always been cautious and never left any traces. But this time, he did a foolish thing and actually painted the woman in his dream. If it fell into someone's hands, it would ruin her reputation in vain. If it was seen by someone with ulterior motives, it might bring disaster to her. Originally, he thought that his study was locked and luckily thought that no one would see it. But in fact, even Gu Shishu had the key to his study. Go and report to Madam later that someone has touched my study and lost a few precious paintings. Find out who else in the mansion has the key to my study and who came here today. The paintings in the water had all been smeared, but when Shichi's eyes still fell on the water. After a long while, he slowly said in a cold voice. The manservant didn't quite understand his young master's behavior today. Who came here? Didn't Cousin Miss come here? Instead of catching Cousin Miss directly, young master asked Madam to ask about it. Did I really make a mistake? Does young master not like Cousin Miss at all? Thinking of this, the manservant was happy and hurriedly agreed. In fact, he didn't like Cousin Miss either. She obviously followed second young master, but she still came to provoke his young master, which made second young master stare at third young master from time to time. She was really not a woman. Madam even wanted second young master to marry Cousin Miss. Chapter 874. Xiao Wanru and Gu Shishu returned to the flower hall where they used to entertain guests. After what had happened before, Gu Shishu no longer dared to be unreasonable in front of Xiao Wanru and was even unwilling to appear in front of Xiao Wanru. After coming back, she sat with Xiao Kailing and they talked intimately. The two of them grew up together, but Xiao Kailing used to play with Xiao Caihuan. Only Gu Shishu was close to Wen Shiyan, the miss of the Wen's mansion, and Xiao Yanru was close to Xiao Jia. Later, Wen Shiyan had an accident, so the two families lived apart. Later, when they grew up, for the sake of the girl's reputation, the side door between the two mansions was blocked. However, there was no one else now, so Gu Shishu felt that she could talk more with Xiao Kailing. The two of them talked about some interesting things in their childhood. Xiao Wanru sat beside them and listened with calm eyes. She seemed to be very interested, but in fact, her mind had long been wandering. What did Wen Shiqi mean by painting this picture? Did he also remember what had happened in the last life? She clearly didn't think of it when she saw him before. Why did he suddenly remember something? But even so, he shouldn't have painted this kind of picture. If others saw it, they would really think that she had slept with him before, especially Chu Luqian. If Chu Luqian knew what he would do, Xiao Wanru was really not sure. In the last life, Chu Luqian in Xiao Wanru's memory was dark. Although he was high and mighty, in fact, he gave people a sense of darkness, despair, and hostility. In particular, she remembered the last scene very clearly. On the road of the imperial palace, the bodies of the beauties died, and the blood dyed the high palace red. What was he doing? Why did he do that? With Chu Liuqian's temperament, he would not do that unless he was crazy. But what made him so crazy? He even killed those weak beauties who were harmless to him and dyed the sky with blood. Why? Why was he so desperate, so bloody, and so violent? Did something happen? What did she forget? She unconsciously clenched the handkerchief in her hand, as if the soft handkerchief could support her. Under her thick eyelashes, her eyes were cold and trembling. She didn't dare to continue guessing, nor did she dare to make more assumptions. Is it, fifth sister? Fifth sister. Zhao Shiran's voice seemed to come from beyond the clouds, pulling her back from her thoughts. First sister-in-law. Xiao Wanru raised her head and said softly. Fifth sister, are you not feeling well? Why is your face so pale? Zhao Shiran whispered with concern. Xiao Wanru's face had always been white and tender with a little pink, which was a very healthy color. She looked delicate and beautiful. But now her face was as white as snow with a frosty aura, as if she could not stand it in the next moment. Gu Shishu looked at her with a little doubt in her eyes. Xiao Wanru reached out to touch her head and said weakly, I don't know if I didn't sleep well last night. I feel a little uncomfortable now. I'll take you to rest. Zhao Shiran suggested. Such banquets would usually have a courtyard for the ladies to rest in. No need. I may feel better after sitting down. Xiao Wanru shook her head and refused Zhao Shiran's kindness. No, you can't be sick now. You'd better take a rest first. If you still don't feel well, I'll accompany you back first. Zhao Shiran said meaningfully. Xiao Wanru was about to get married, and her husband was Prince Chen. The wedding date was close, so she couldn't have any accidents at this time. Fifth Miss Xiao, I'll take you to rest. Seeing Xiao Wanru's unusual look, Gu Shishu stood up and said. Old madam and madam when we're talking with several older madams. At this time, there were many people, so no one noticed them. Thank you, Miss Gu. Before Xiao Wanru could speak, Zhao Shiran had already answered. It's no trouble. I've arranged a place to rest. Gu Shishu said with a smile. I'll go with you, fifth sister. Seeing that she had nothing to do here, Xiao Kailing also stood up. At this point, Xiao Wanru would seem a little pretentious to refuse. She stood up and left the flower hall with Gu Shishu. The place to rest was a little far from the flower hall, but it was much quieter. At this time, there were no womenfolk coming, so it was even quieter. They accompanied Xiao Wanru into a room on the side. The servant girl of the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion waiting there hurriedly came over to served them fragrant tea, and then left politely. First sister-in-law, fourth sister, you can go back first. Miss Gu, please go back. I'll be fine after lying down for a while. There's nothing else to do. Xiao Wanru said politely. I have nothing to do anyway, so I'll accompany you, fifth sister. Fourth sister, after you go back, tell grandma that I'm here to accompany you. I'm worried about you being here alone. Zhao Shiran arranged in the manner of a sister-in-law. Xiao Kailing nodded. She didn't tell old madam when she left just now, so she should go back and tell her at this time. Gu Shishu looked at Xiao Wanru, who looked pale, with suspicion in her eyes. She wanted to stay and sound out Xiao Wanru, but she had no reason to stay. After saying a few words of concern to Xiao Wanru, she left with Xiao Kailing. Fifth sister, go inside and have a rest. I'll sit outside. Zhao Shiran said softly. Xiao Wanru nodded and didn't refuse. She was also in a mess at this time, so she really wanted to find a place with no one to have a good rest and think about it. If Wen Shiqi really remembered what had happened in the last life, what should she do? What could she do? In this life, she didn't have much connection with Wen Shiqi before. Except for her warning at the beginning, in her memory, Wen Shiqi treated her very well. It was not bad, but it was like a kind and gentle elder brother. Even if Wen Shiqi thought of it, he shouldn't have this painting. Xiao Wanru took off her coat and lay on the bed inside, thinking about it in a half-awake state. What happened to Wen Shiqi was so unexpected that she panicked for a moment. She didn't know how to tell Chu Luchan about it. It was too mysterious and unbelievable. Moreover, there was no way to tell him about it. If Xiao Wanru hadn't experienced it herself, she wouldn't have believed it. In a daze, she felt a little dizzy and then slowly fell into a deep sleep. She seemed to be groping in the darkness. Suddenly, a light flashed, and some of her lost memories seemed to have recovered a little. Zhao Shiran and his servant girl were sitting outside. Hearing that the voices inside had quieted down, he took a book of poems from the dressing table and began to read it. The book had been prepared long ago. It should have been kept for fear that the womenfolk would be idle. There was not only a book, but also some other small toys. There were even a few small flower products, which were not finished products. The misses who were resting here could play with the servant girl Zhao Wanhua. Recently, flower products were popular in the capital city. The servant girls who followed the misses had more or less flower products. They chatted while making some fashionable flower products, which was a way for the missus to pass the time and not get tired. Moreover, these flowers had been partly made, and the head had been made, so it was easier to make them. With some small ornaments prepared by the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion for the missus, it was indeed unique and novel. However, Zhao Shiran didn't like it very much, so she picked up the book of poems and read it casually. It was very quiet in the room, and only the sound of her turning pages could be heard. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door gently. Zhao Shiran looked up and motioned for the servant girl to open the door. When the door was opened, a beautiful round-faced girl ran in. When she saw Zhao Shiran, she said in surprise, "Big sister, you are really here." Zhao Shiran also showed joy on her face. She hurriedly reached out and pointed inside, hinting that someone was going to sleep inside. The beautiful round-faced girl immediately lowered her voice and nodded. Even her footsteps were much lighter, but they were still very big. It could be seen that she was extremely surprised. "Big sister, I heard that you were here, so I came here in a hurry." The girl walked to Zhao Shiran and sat down beside her. She said in an excited voice, "Big sister, how are you doing in Marquis Xing's mansion? I heard that people in Marquis Xing's mansion don't seem to like this marriage very much. They said that the marriage between you and eldest brother-in-law caused Marquis Xing's mansion to be demoted." The girl was Zhao Shiran's biological sister, Zhao Shiqiong. The relationship between the two sisters was very good. When Zhao Shiqiong returned home that day, she didn't find time to talk with her sister in private. She was very worried about her sister's life in Marquis Xing's mansion. Although her sister had been smart since she was a child, it was useless to be smart when such an unfortunate thing happened. "There's no such thing. It's just the gossip of the people outside." Zhao Shiran replied softly with a smile. His expression was extremely peaceful. "Big sister, did they really not do anything to you?" Zhao Shiqiong asked doubtfully. "It's really nothing. They are all very good to me. You can ask my father and mother to rest assured. Don't tell them the nonsense that people outside spread, or they will be annoyed." Zhao Shiran continued to comfort Zhao Shiqiong. Hearing her sister say this again and again, Zhao Shiqiong became doubtful. She turned her head to look at the inner room. There was a curtain hanging in the inner room, so she couldn't see anything. She couldn't help being curious, but her voice became lower and lower. "Who is inside? Is it old madam of Marquis Xing's mansion?" "No, it's fifth Miss Xiao." Zhao Shiran shook her head. "Fifth Miss Xiao." After Zhao Shiqiong repeated it, she suddenly became furious and said indignantly on behalf of her eldest sister, "Big sister, you said that you were doing well. Look at your current life. A sister-in-law wants to rest and sleep, and you, as her eldest sister-in-law, help her guard the door. Is this the rule of Marquis Xing's mansion? No wonder people say that Marquis Xing's mansion seems to be very well behaved, but in fact, it is a place without rules." When she was angry, her voice involuntarily became louder. Zhao Shiran hurriedly reached out to cover her mouth and said in a low voice, "Fifth sister has fallen asleep. Lower your head. No one asked me to guard the door. I have nothing to do, so I came here with fifth sister. It's not what you think." Chapter 875. It's not what I think. Why should you accompany her? Shouldn't you accompany old madam of the Lord Protector's mansion? Zhao Shiqiong pushed Zhao Shiran's hand away and said unhappily. "It should be like this, but I also want to have some leisure time." Zhao Shiran said helplessly. Hearing that it was Zhao Shiran's idea, Zhao Shiran looked a little better. His anger subsided and he became curious about Xiao Wanru inside. "Big sister, I heard that the fifth Miss Xiao is very beautiful, so Prince Chen likes her. You have met her. How is she compared with the first Miss Xiao?" Zhao Shiqiong had met Xiao Yanru. Moreover, Xiao Yanru was the first beauty in the capital city. In Zhao Shiran's eyes, no matter how outstanding Xiao Wanru was, she could not be more beautiful than Xiao Yanru. She is more outstanding than the first Miss Xiao. Zhao Shiran's words did not interrupt Zhao Shiqiong's curiosity, but became more and more enthusiastic. Big sister, can I take a peek? Zhao Shiqiong said and wanted to get up. Zhao Shiran grabbed her sleeve forcefully and shook his head at her, indicating that she couldn't go in at this time. There are maids inside. If you sneak in like this, you'll bring shame to our minister's mansion. A miss from an aristocratic family was the most careful in doing things. How could she do such a sneaky thing? Then I'll stay here with you, big sister. Anyway, I have nothing to do. Zhao Shiqiong rolled her eyes and said. She really didn't want to leave without seeing her in person. The fifth Miss Xiao really aroused her curiosity. No, if you don't go back, my mother will come to you later. Zhao Shiran shook his head and disagreed. All right. Zhao Shiqiong stood up helplessly and said, Father also asked me to ask you. I don't know what father asked me to say. I left in a hurry and didn't ask clearly. Her father used to talk to her big sister the most, but he had nothing to say to her, so she really didn't know what it meant. Zhao Shiran smiled slightly and said, Help me tell father that there is no progress and ask him not to worry. I got it. I'll tell father when I go back. I don't know what you are talking about so mysteriously. Zhao Shiqiong said indifferently. Her father and elder sister often said some strange things that she didn't understand and didn't like to listen to. After the two sisters exchanged a few more words, Zhao Shiqiong left. The door gently closed, making a soft sound. The room became quiet again. Xiao Wanru suddenly sat up in the inner room and stared straight ahead. Yujie was startled and asked anxiously, Miss, what's wrong? Xiao Wanru's eyes seemed to stop in her dream. She saw Hua Sheng, that Hua Sheng. At first, there were some unconscious fragments. There seemed to be Chu Liuchen's figure and her own, but they were all unconscious fragments and seemed to be meaningless. She didn't sleep well. There were people talking beside her, so she was in a daze. But just now, there seemed to be a sound that broke her frozen dream. It was the Hua Sheng, the exquisite Hua Sheng. She saw the exquisite Hua Sheng that fell from the carriage. She squatted down to pick it up and looked around. No one paid attention to her in this area. Unconsciously, she walked to a remote place. In her last life, her knowledge was much shallow. Although she could see that this Hua Sheng was very beautiful, it must be expensive. It was so beautiful that it must be expensive. However, he didn't know that it was something that only the Empress could wear. Since she had lost such a precious thing, the owner of the house would definitely come to find it. So, she waited under the eaves where no one was, waiting for the person who lost Hua Sheng to come. In the end, it was Qi Baiyu who came. Qi Baiyu heard that she was driven out of the Prime Minister's mansion and came to find her. Seeing that she was in a mess, he protected her and brought her to his yard. After that, he recommended her to the imperial palace to be a painter for the beauties. So it was Chu Liuchen who lost the Hua Sheng at that time. Fifth sister, what's wrong with you? Hearing the noise inside, Zhao Shiran was also startled. He hurried in and saw Xiao Wanru sitting there in a daze with her eyes fixed. She seemed to be in a bad situation, so she panicked. Miss. Yujie, who had never seen Xiao Wanru like this, was so scared that she was about to cry. Hearing the voices in her ears, Xiao Wanru woke up from the shock and confusion at the moment just now. She turned to look at Yujie and Zhao Shiran. Gradually, her eyes became focused and she could see their figures. Fifth sister, are you okay? Zhao Shiran looked at Xiao Wanru's eyes and found that she looked confused as if she had just woken up. He asked, did you have a nightmare? Xiao Wanru blinked her eyes and fluttered her long eyelashes twice. Then she raised her head and said, I'm fine. It seems that I had a nightmare. Miss, drink some water first. Yujie handed a cup of warm water to Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru took it. When the warm water entered her throat, she clearly knew that it was just a dream and what was happening now was real. After drinking a few mouthfuls of warm water and handing the cup to Yujie, Xiao Wanru turned sideways and coughed in a low voice. Thank you, first sister-in-law. I'm fine now. Are you feeling a little better now? Zhao Shiran said and reached out his hand as if he was going to feel Xiao Wanru's pulse. However, when he put his hand on Xiao Wanru's hand, he held it. If Xiao Wanru hadn't known how to feel pulses and was familiar with this method, she would have almost thought that she had made a mistake. I'm much better. I'm fine now. Xiao Wanru said with a smile and a leisurely look in her eyes. Zhao Shiran seemed to know how to feel pulses, but she didn't know how good his medical skills were. That's good. It's good that you're fine. Zhao Shiran was relieved. First sister-in-law, it's getting late. Has anyone come to call us over? Xiao Wanru looked at the sky outside the window and said. It was almost noon. No one has come yet, but it should be soon. Fifth sister, if you feel fine, you can get up. Let's go over now in case the host comes to find us. Zhao Shiran said with a smile and left the inner room. Xiao Wanru composed herself and got off the bed with Yujia's help. After putting on her outer clothes, she sat in front of the dressing table and Yujia combed her hair again. The dressing table inside was fully equipped with all the necessary items. Did someone come over just now? Xiao Wanru asked casually. Yes, it seems to be first grandma's younger sister. I heard a few words. Yujia said in a low voice. Although the voices outside were low, it had been very quiet inside, so Yujia still heard a few words. First grandma's younger sister came to see first grandma. They talked for a while and just left. Miss, you suddenly sat up. Miss, are you really okay? Yujia was still worried, so she came back to the topic. Xiao Wanru shook her head and said, I'm fine. I was really haunted by a nightmare. Yes. She said it again and again, so Yujia believed it. The scene of Miss sitting up in a daze just now scared her, and she calmed down at this time. After dressing up a little, Xiao Wanru came out of the inner room with Yujia. When she came to the outer room, she saw Zhao Shiran and the maid making a flower. She became interested, sat beside Zhao Shiran and watched her make the flower. Fifth younger sister, do you want to make one? It looks pretty. Zhao Shiran said as he pointed at the other half-finished flower. It was light white, but there was a pinkish-purple color at the corner, which was the one on the lace. It looked elegant and outstanding. Moreover, there were some half-hanging pearls, which made the flower extremely beautiful and charming. However, the white gave people a sense of elegance, which was not very light, but not too bright. Among the several semi-finished flowers here, this one was the most outstanding. Xiao Wanru couldn't help nodding and reaching out to take the flower. Yujia also came over to help. In fact, the master and the maid were not very good at making this kind of flower. Yujia came over to help, but in the end, the more she helped, the worse it became. The originally very simple flower directly fell apart with Yujia's help, and even its original appearance was ruined. It seemed to be useless. Zhao Shiran couldn't stand it anymore. She put down the almost finished flower at hand and asked the maid, Qiu Yu, to finish it. She helped Xiao Wanru on behalf of Yujia. With her help, the flower really took shape this time. Yujia stood aside with shame and envy and kept praising, this flower is so beautiful. First grandma and miss are so clever and skillful. I'm used to doing rough work, but I can't wrap such a silk flower well. Zhao Shiran helped Xiao Wanru wrap the flower up with a smile. After looking at it, she put it on the right side of Xiao Wanru's hair bun and immediately clapped her hands and said, Fifth sister, you look so beautiful wearing this flower. Good, really good. The previous one was a little too plain. You are going to marry into Prince Chen's mansion soon. It's not good to wear such a plain one all the time. The flower was light with a trace of delicate and charming. It was indeed the favorite color of young girls. Matched with the rice grain-sized pearls, it became more and more colorful and matched Xiao Wanru's temperament very well. It made her little face as white as jade, and her facial features were as exquisite as a fairy coming out of a painting. First sister-in-law. Xiao Wanru was a little embarrassed and reached out to take the flower down. Fifth sister, don't take it off. Let's wear it together. We made it ourselves, so it's a little different from others. Zhao Shiran said with a smile. She reached out to take the silk flower from Qiu Yu's hand and inserted it into her hair bun. She also chose a good color. Wearing it, she looked like a real flower in her black hair, which was more attractive than a real flower. There was a faint fragrance lingering on the sleeves. It should be coming from the flowers. The flowers had already been sprinkled with some fragrant powder. After the two servant girls took a mirror from the side and showed it to them, both of them felt satisfied, so they didn't take it off. Seeing that it was almost time, they tidied up a little and went out together. There were servant girls waiting outside the door. Seeing them come out, a servant girl immediately led them to the banquet. It was getting late. When they were halfway there, they met someone who came to look for them in a hurry. Seeing that the two of them were fine, she breathed a sigh of relief. Did someone fall into the river? Chapter 876. Who fell into the river? Hearing the servant girl's words, Zhao Shiran asked in disbelief. A banquet like this was basically well guarded, so such a thing was unlikely to happen. It's the fourth miss of your mansion. The servant girl was a little bashful. After all, the two people in front of her were also from Marquis Xing's mansion. Their miss came to their mansion as a guest, but such a thing happened. No one could be happy about it. How could the fourth sister fall into the river? Xiao Wanru asked in a low voice. Xiao Kailing was not a particularly noisy person, so it was impossible for her to fall into the river. Moreover, there was a servant girl with her. I don't know. I was not there at that time. The servant girl of the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion lowered her head. Seeing that the servant girl could not get any information, Zhao Shiran and Xiao Wanru hurriedly followed the servant girl back. They did not go to the banquet, but to the flower hall. However, there were not many people in the flower hall. Only Madam of the Deputy Prime Minister, Old Madam, Xiao Kailing and Gu Shishu were there. Xiao Kailing was crying, and Gu Shishu was also wiping her tears. The atmosphere in the flower hall was very solemn. Zhao Shiran and Xiao Wanru came over and bowed to Old Madam first, and then to Madam of the Deputy Prime Minister. Then they were led to sit aside. After they sat down, Old Madam asked, "Fourth miss, is what you said true?" "Grandma, I dare not lie to you. It was really Miss Gu who invited me there. That place is also the place where we played together when we were children, so I went there. But I didn't expect that it was she who lured me there and pushed me into the water." Xiao Kailing raised her red and swollen eyes, pointed at Gu Shishu and said angrily. "Not many people know that place, and it was I who was invited there. How could it not be Miss Gu? Miss Gu, do you want to ruin my reputation?" Xiao Kailing couldn't swallow her anger that she was involved in an unexpected disaster at a banquet. Fortunately, there was no one else around at that time, otherwise she would lose her reputation. Recently, people in the mansion were talking about reputation. Her mother had warned her again and again not to lose her reputation, which Xiao Kailing had always kept in mind. "Miss Minglan, I really didn't push you. I did ask you to come, but didn't I leave for a while because I had something to do? I really don't know that you fell into the water, and I don't know who pushed you. How can you frame me without seeing the person? If I really wanted to harm you, why would I personally invite you here?" Gu Shimei was also crying. She explained while crying. "Who knows if you are deliberately deceiving us? When you were young, you always followed Big Sister and Big Sister. You were always cunning and did things that others didn't know." Seeing that Gu Shimei still didn't admit it, Xiao Kailing angrily criticized loudly. Although her clothes had been changed and her hair had been stirred, she still looked wet. Her face was deathly pale from the cold and she looked extremely pitiful. Old Madam coughed in a low voice, and her face darkened. Xiao Yenru would always be her pride, and they might have a future together. Zhao Shiran saw the expression on old madam's face keenly, reached out to hold Xiao Keiling's hand, and comforted her in a low voice, "Fourth sister, don't say it now. Tell us the situation at that time, and madam will definitely give our mansion an explanation." Her warm hand immediately made Xiao Keiling feel a trace of warmth when she held Xiao Keiling's hand, and tears fell down one by one. She felt more and more wronged, and almost choked with sobs. "First sister-in-law, it's really Miss Gu who hurt me. Okay, I know. We'll listen to Grandma." Zhao Shiran comforted her and looked back at old madam. Old madam coughed in a low voice again, and put the blame on Madam Xiang. "Madam Wen, what do you think? Shishu, where were you at that time? When fourth Miss Xiao had an accident?" Madam Wen turned to look at Gu Shimei, who was also crying, and asked with a sullen face. "Aunt, I was with the servant girls at that time. If you don't believe me, you can ask them. There were not only one, but 2 servant girls. After I left for a while, fourth Miss Xiao had an accident when I came back. I didn't meet fourth Miss Xiao at all during this time. How could I hurt her?" Gu Shishu also complained of being wronged. Xiao Keiling disagreed with her explanation. "It's easy for you to ask someone to do it in your own mansion. Why did you do it yourself?" "Fourth Miss, I really didn't." Gu Shishu cried again. It was unclear. One said that it had nothing to do with her, and someone proved that she was not there at that time. The other said that even if she was not there, she had planned it. Because this was the Prime Minister's mansion, Gu Shishu had the geographical advantage. Madam Wen still had to entertain the guests outside, so she was not in the mood to pay attention to the affairs of these little girls. She made a decision on the spot and said, "Shishu, I apologize to fourth Mississippi. No matter whether you pushed fourth Miss or not, you had an appointment before. It's your fault from the beginning." "Aunt?" Gu Shimei looked at Madam Wen in disbelief. Although she was a cousin in the Wenxiang Fu, the Wenxiang Furen did not have any other daughters. Looking at her made her think of her delicate and weak youngest daughter in the past. Instead, this doting daughter's heart was completely devoted to her. Basically, she would not be wronged. Even if something happened, she would stand by her side. Now she was asked to admit that she did not do it and apologize to Xiao Keiling in front of so many people, which was equivalent to slapping her in the face. If this was spread out in the future, how could she live with her dignity? Apologize now. She is a guest from afar. You didn't entertain the guest well, and you only minded your own business after you asked someone out. It's your fault. Madam Wen's face was very cold, and she looked at Gu Shishu with a little anger. Even though she used to dote on Gu Shishu, she knew that if this matter was not solved in this way, it would be more serious, and it would not be good for Gu Shishu. Seeing that Madam Wen was angry, Gu Shimei had no choice but to apologize to Xiao Keiling while crying. After apologizing, she covered her face and ran out crying. "Old madam, I will still investigate this matter. But no matter what, it is our mansion's fault. I will prepare a generous gift to your mansion later to apologize to fourth Miss." Madam Wen ignored Gu Shishu, who ran out crying, and said to old madam with a wry smile, "I spoiled her and made her so careless." Xiao Wanru looked up at Madam Wen. Until now, Madam Wen had not admitted that Gu Shishu pushed Xiao Keiling and only admitted that she had made a mistake. Although Xiao Keiling was frightened, nothing really happened to her. Old madam could not be unforgiving, so she nodded at once and let this matter pass. However, it was inconvenient for Xiao Keiling to stay in such a situation. Xiao Wanru offered to send Xiao Keiling back and left Xiao Shiran to accompany old madam. Old madam nodded at this plan. No matter what, Xiao Shiran was the new daughter-in-law. She could not come to Prime Minister Wen's mansion and leave without eating. What would the madams and misses of Minister Wen's mansion think? Moreover, the madams and misses of Minister Wen's mansion had also come just now. Xiao Wanru accompanied Xiao Keiling to get on the carriage of Marquis Xing's mansion. The carriage turned out of the gate of Prime Minister Wen's mansion and arrived at the front of Marquis Xing's mansion after another turn. Xiao Keiling had been shivering and was not in a good condition. Although she had changed her clothes, she was still cold. Xiao Wanru accompanied Xiao Keiling all the way to the third branch. Hearing that Xiao Keiling had an accident, the third madam struggled to get up and see Xiao Keiling. Seeing that Xiao Keiling was also shivering in the quilt, she burst into tears. She only had 2 daughters, and now they had accidents one after another. Moreover, the situation of the third branch was not good at the moment. The more she thought about it, the sadder she became and almost fainted. After comforting her with a few words, Xiao Wanru persuaded her to have a rest. The third madam was indeed in poor health, and she did not completely pretend to faint before. Seeing that Xiao Wanru sincerely persuaded her to have a rest, the third madam wiped her tears and expressed her gratitude. Then she was helped out by the servants. Xiao Wanru did not go back to the Piaoyin courtyard. After asking someone to boil the brown sugar ginger soup for Xiao Keiling, she helped Xiao Keiling drink it and stayed aside. Xiao Keiling had slept for a long time. When old madam sent someone to inquire about her after returning to the mansion, she had not woken up yet. Hearing that Xiao Wanru had been staying here, old madam was satisfied and asked someone to send some nourishing medicinal materials over. Xiao Keiling could only do this now. If it were in the past, old madam would still have the confidence to ask Prime Minister Wen's mansion for the reason. Now Marquis Xing's mansion was weak and could not be favored by the emperor. Marquis Xing's mansion could not afford to offend another important minister's mansion, let alone Prime Minister Wen's mansion. Thinking that a little cousin of Prime Minister Wen's mansion dared to harm the lineal granddaughter of her mansion, old madam could not swallow her anger. But so what if she could not swallow it? It was meaningless to take it seriously. Old madam was the best at weighing gains and losses. Thinking of this, she swallowed her anger. After having a banquet in Prime Minister Wen's mansion, she came back with the excuse of worrying about Xiao Keiling. When Xiao Keiling woke up, it was already 1:00 in the morning. Before she opened her eyes, she heard a gentle voice in her ear, "Fourth sister, you're awake. How do you feel?" Although it was spring and the weather was much warmer today, it was still cold in nature. If she fell into the water, she would suffer from a cold disease for the rest of her life. This was also the reason why Xiao Wanru made Xiao Keiling drink the brown sugar ginger soup before letting her sleep. "Thank you, fifth sister." Xiao Keiling's voice was hoarse but very sincere. The servant girl helped her sit up. Xiao Wanru put a cushion behind her and reached out to feel her pulse. After finding that her pulse was still stable, she put down her hand and said with a smile, "Fourth sister, don't worry. It's nothing serious." Xiao Wanru's words made Xiao Keiling breathe a sigh of relief. Seeing that Xiao Wanru suddenly wanted to say something but stopped on second thought, she waved her hand after thinking for a while. The servants in her room immediately left, leaving only a trusted servant girl. "Fifth sister, Gu Shishu is really not a good person. I'll tell you one thing." Xiao Keiling stammered, but still said it. Chapter 877. Xiao Wanru knew that Gu Shishu was not a good person in her last life. On the surface, it seemed to be just a quarrel between children, but Gu Shishu was actually very vicious. In her last life, after she and the second young master of the Wen's mansion killed Wen Shiqi, she couldn't even tolerate her, a widow, and instigated Madam of the Wen's mansion to drive her out. At that time, she, who was homeless, had no way out and could only die in the end. If it weren't for Qi Baiyu or the person behind Qi Baiyu, she could only die at that time. "Fourth sister, why do you say that?" Xiao Wanru said calmly. "Fifth younger sister, what I said. Actually, I don't think it's reasonable, but I really saw it, but I've never told anyone, not even mother. I don't know if fifth younger sister believes me." Xiao Keiling looked very conflicted, and her words were also incoherent. Xiao Wanru nodded with a smile and said, "Of course I believe you, fourth sister." Compared with the other misses in the mansion, Xiao Keiling was the least scheming one, and she showed her thoughts directly on her face. I saw something when I was young. I think it's true, but I'm afraid and I don't dare to say it." Xiao Keiling looked a little flustered and reached out to hold Xiao Wanru's hand, as if she wanted to borrow Xiao Wanru's strength. Xiao Wanru looked at her with a smile and let her hold her hand. Xiao Keiling held Xiao Wanru's hand so hard that Xiao Wanru's wrist was a little painful. Even so, Xiao Wanru did not shake her off and still let her hold her hand. Perhaps Xiao Wanru's calmness had sensed Xiao Keiling's reaction. Xiao Keiling calmed down a little and relaxed her hand slowly, but still held Xiao Wanru's hand. She looked at Xiao Wanru and said with a serious face, "Fifth sister, I think Wen Shiyan was killed by Gu Shishu." "Who?" Xiao Wanru didn't understand at the moment. After asking, she suddenly thought that this was Wen Shiqi's younger sister who died early, and her face immediately became gloomy. "She's the miss of the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion and the only daughter of the Deputy Prime Minister's wife. At that time, we played together." It was only after Wen Shiyan's accident that the two families blocked this side door. They said that every time the Deputy Prime Minister saw this side door, he would remember the pain of losing his daughter. Xiao Keiling explained in a low voice. Since she had started the conversation, the rest was much easier. The place where Wen Shiyan was killed was also the place where she fell into the water. On that day, I was playing with third sister. Later, third sister was called away, so I ran away alone. Because I ran to the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion from the side door, I was originally going to play with Wen Shiyan, but I didn't expect to see Gu Shishu and eldest sister. They were hiding together and talking about something. There was no one else around to serve them. Seeing that they were very sneaky, I also hid. Later, when I saw them leave after talking for a while, I didn't pay much attention to them and ran back by myself. Later, I heard that Wen Shiyan had an accident. The place where the accident happened to be the place where I saw Gu Shishu and eldest sister hiding and talking. Later, I remembered that there was one of Wen Shiyan's shoes there, and Gu Shishu threw it into the water when she left. Xiao Keiling stammered again with a flash of horror in her eyes. At that time, she didn't pay much attention to it. When she saw Gu Shishu and Xiao Yanru leave, she picked up a shoe on the ground and threw it into the water. She just thought it was fun and wondered whose shoe had been thrown into the water. There were many children, big and small. Sometimes, they would purposely hide or throw away other people's shoes or other things on their body. They had done it all before. The children of the third branch had always been on good terms with the children of the second branch, so Xiao Keiling didn't come out at that time. But later, she felt a lingering fear. If she had come out at that time, would she have been punished by Gu Shishu and Xiao Yanru together? If that was the case, would she also slip and fall into the water? After Wen Shiyan's accident, Xiao Keiling was so scared that she fell ill in the mansion for half a year. During this half year, she had been in a coma. Every time she thought of the scene at that time, Xiao Keiling was scared and flustered. She was in a state of panic. Later, her wet nurse learned about it. While comforting her, the wet nurse told her not to tell anyone and warned her that old madam attached most importance to the first miss in the mansion. If the first miss was involved in this matter and old madam knew it, she was afraid that something bad would happen. The third branch of Marquis Xing's mansion had never attached importance to it. If the third master were not old madam's biological son, he would probably have been sent away with some meager family property. Moreover, Xiao Keiling didn't really see them push someone into the water, so there was no evidence to prove it. The wet nurse was afraid that Xiao Keiling would be sent to a remote village for recuperation by old madam in the name of recuperation and would never be able to return to the capital city. She might even die outside, so she repeatedly told her not to tell anyone about it. No matter who it was, she should not tell anyone. But now Xiao Keiling was very flustered. She felt that she must have been discovered by Gu Shishu. Otherwise, Gu Shishu wouldn't want to kill her, ask her out, and then push her into the water. Who else could it be other than Gu Shishu? Fifth sister, I think Gu Shishu must have known that I saw it, so she did it on purpose. Xiao Keiling was very flustered at this time, so she told Xiao Wanru about the buried past. Wen Shiqi's sister was actually killed by Gu Shishu? After hearing Xiao Keiling's words, Xiao Wanru believed her. If Wen Shiqi's sister were still alive, Madam of the Prime Minister would never treat Gu Shishu so well. Therefore, Wen Shiyan's existence was the obstacle for Gu Shishu to get Madam of the Prime Minister's love. However, Xiao Yanru was also involved in it, which surprised her. With a flash of inspiration, she remembered Dr. Qiu. In her last life, Dr. Qiu, who had treated Wen Shiqi, didn't enter the Prime Minister's mansion but Marquis Xing's mansion to treat Wang Yishu. Could it be the relationship between Gu Shishu and Xiao Yanru? Wen Shiyan's existence had nothing to do with Xiao Yanru. As long as Xiao Yanru was on good terms with Wen Shiyan, she might be on good terms with the Prime Minister's mansion. Given Xiao Yanru's character, she would definitely do the same. In this case, it could only be Gu Shishu who did it. If she guessed correctly, it should be Gu Shishu who did it, and Xiao Yanru happened to see it. Although they were young, they were both ruthless. After reaching an agreement, Xiao Yanru covered up what she saw and helped Gu Shishu. Xiao Yanru had something on Gu Shishu, so it would be much easier for Xiao Yanru to ask Gu Shishu to do anything in the future. With something on Gu Shishu, it was more beneficial than being on good terms with Wen Shiyan. He slightly lowered his eyes, and his pupils contracted. Then, a bloodthirsty and vicious aura slowly seeped out. No wonder Gu Shishu didn't want to keep him alive in the last life. Originally, he was just a useless person. Even if he was raised in the backyard of the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion, he wouldn't be of much use. The Deputy Prime Minister's mansion had raised so many people, and he was really not a big deal. Therefore, neither Wen Shiqi nor Xiao Wanru had expected the scene in the morning hall. Before Wen Shiqi died, he even repeatedly told Xiao Wanru that he had made an agreement with his mother that if Xiao Wanru wanted to stay in the Wen's mansion in the future, the Wen's mansion would definitely take care of her. If she wanted to leave, the Wen's mansion would also prepare some property for her so that she could live a good life even if she left the Wen's mansion. But the fact was beyond her and Wen Shiqi's expectation. Wen Shiqi had always been intelligent. Even when he was so ill, he had arranged a way out for her. He was sure that Xiao Wanru would have no worries in the future, so he closed his eyes. In fact, the fact gave Wen Shiqi a hard slap in the face. But at that time, he was already dead. His mother and Gu Shishu viciously drove her out of the morning hall and out of the Prime Minister's mansion with groundless charges. If it hadn't been for someone pushing them hard in the back, the Prime Minister's mansion wouldn't have done this. It would be bad for the reputation of the Prime Minister's mansion if their daughter-in-law was driven out before their son's body was cold. But even so, they still did it. Therefore, Xiao Yanru closed her eyes hard, slowly sensed the coldness in her heart, and then slowly opened her eyes. She didn't comment on Madame Wen's behavior, but she didn't show much respect for her. She was not a saint and had her own concept of right and wrong. But she would not let go of Gu Shishu and Xiao Yanru. Perhaps it was not only Dr. Qiu, but also Xiao Yanru behind the scenes. She didn't expect that even though Xiao Yanru had been given the cold shoulder after entering the imperial palace and almost had no chance to make a comeback, Xiao Yanru still had such great power that she could provoke Gu Shishu to attack her. When she was in Wen Shiqi's study, she had felt strange that Gu Shishu didn't seem to want to expose her. If the person in the painting was really her in this life, she must have felt guilty after being frightened by Gu Shishu's actions. Gu Shishu must be sure that the person in the painting was her. If that was the case, Gu Shishu didn't want to expose her, so she was blackmailing her. Xiao Yanru, as the instigator, was pulling strings behind the scenes. Gu Shishu threatened her to do something to save Xiao Yanru. What a good scheme. Otherwise, Gu Shishu, who was determined to win Wen Shiqi's heart, should want to ruin her reputation instead of blackmailing her. Fifth sister, you don't believe me, do you? Seeing Xiao Wanru remain silent for a long time, Xiao Kailing asked anxiously. Fourth sister, of course I believe you. Be careful in the future. Don't let Gu Shishu find out that you know something. Otherwise, what happened today may happen again. Xiao Wanru warned her softly. In fact, not only Gu Shishu, but also her mansion. With old Madame's character, she would definitely protect Xiao Yanru. Now she was curious about who pushed Xiao Kailing behind the scenes. Was it really Gu Shishu? She felt that it didn't seem to be Gu Shishu. If it wasn't Gu Shishu, who could it be? Did anyone also find out the problem? Don't worry. I won't say it. I don't dare to say it, but I won't let Gu Shishu off. Although Xiao Kailing was timid, she was unwilling to let Gu Shishu slip away in vain. Fourth sister, don't worry. Even if we don't investigate it, the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion will. Since this thing happened in the guest's mansion, they will investigate it even if they suppress it. Otherwise, it may be the people in their mansion who get into trouble next time. Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and said meaningfully. This matter wouldn't end like this. Chapter 878. Tell me, what the hell is going on? The Prime Minister's wife asked with a gloomy face. She had just sent off the guests in the mansion. In fact, she was exhausted, but she still did not rest and asked someone to summon Gu Shishu. Aunt, it's really not me. Why did I push forth Miss Xiao? Why did I push her for no reason? Gu Shishu cried aggrievedly again. She looked delicate, and the way she wiped her tears and looked aggrieved at this moment was very distressing. Since it's not you, who is it? Since you asked her to come with you, why did you leave? This time, the Prime Minister's wife did not ask any more questions when she saw her crying aggrievedly. This happened in the mansion, but she did not know anything about it. This was a very dangerous thing. Inexplicably thinking of her little daughter, who also fell into the water and died, the Prime Minister's wife's heart ached. She loved this little daughter the most, but she did not expect that she would die early. I was supposed to accompany fourth Miss Xiao, but on the way, I said that second cousin was looking for me, so I went to have a look. Gu Shishu's eyes drifted. The Prime Minister's wife was very angry. Her second son was not a proper person. He and Gu Shishu had been having an affair for a long time, and now they were in such a situation. She was very angry before, and she really wanted Gu Shishu to be her second son's concubine. But recently, her sister-in-law's transfer order was coming back, and it was said that she should be promoted. The Prime Minister also thought that her second son was a good-for-nothing anyway, and he was afraid that it was impossible for him to marry a wife from a noble family, so he simply married Gu Shishu. Whether she was a concubine or not, she would lose the face of her family. Besides, her sister-in-law would definitely not agree. The Prime Minister's wife thought about it and felt that it was reasonable, so she agreed to let Gu Shishu marry her second son instead of being his concubine. That was why she brought her out to this banquet and let her show off in front of others. She did not expect that Gu Shishu would cause trouble again, and it was related to her second son. The Prime Minister's wife knocked on the table hard and said angrily, "Why does Shi-an want to see you? Why does he have to come at this time? It's nothing important. It's just some outside affairs. Second cousin doesn't know." Gu Shishu pinched the corner of her clothes guiltily and lowered her head, blushing. In fact, she was also very disgusted. If Wen Xian had not repeatedly asked her to go out, she would not have gone out. When she went out, it was indeed Wen Xian. However, when Xian saw her, there was nothing good. He just hugged her and kissed her a little. He said that they had no time to see each other recently. At this time, when Madam of the Prime Minister was too busy to lift her hand, she called Gu Shishu over. Gu Shishu had always liked Wen Shiqi the most, but now she had no choice but to marry Wen Xian. Although she didn't like him, she could only let him hug and kiss her for a while. After that, she left Wen Xian with the excuse that she had to help Madam Wen entertain the guests. However, it was inconvenient for her to say this to the Prime Minister's wife, so she could only vaguely push the responsibility to Wen Xian. Hearing that it was Wen Xian again, Mrs. Wen was furious. Her other two sons, no matter the eldest son or the youngest son, were very promising. Only her second son was not good at literature or martial arts. Moreover, he was such a playful person. It was fine that he was always messing around with Gu Shishu, but on this day, he was actually fooling around with her. He did not look like a son of an aristocratic family at all. Of decency. You. Madame Wen was so angry that she was gasping for breath. She wished that she had never given birth to this second son. Aunt, I really didn't push forth Miss Xiao. Who knows if she slipped and fell into the water and pushed the blame to me. How could I push her at the same time? Besides, I didn't know that second cousin came to me in advance, and it was impossible for me to arrange someone else in advance. Seeing that the minister's wife was angry, Gu Shishu felt aggrieved and wiped her tears with her handkerchief. The prime minister's wife took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in her heart. She had raised Gu Shishu since she was a child and treated her as her daughter, so she liked her very much. Seeing Gu Shishu's aggrieved look, her heart softened. Her second son was disappointing and always wronged her niece. How could the minister's wife not know that Gu Shishu liked Wen Shiqi? But now, due to a combination of circumstances, she could only do this. Does anyone else know that you have an appointment with fourth Miss Xiao? The minister's wife calmed down and stopped scolding Gu Shishu. She did not believe that Xiao Kailing would deliberately fall into the water in order to frame Gu Shishu. In such cold weather, one mishap could lead to a lifelong illness, not to mention that Xiao Kailing was an unmarried girl. If she got cold all over her body, it would also affect her children in the future. I just came up with this idea on the spur of the moment. I just want to ask fourth Miss Xiao to go for a walk. We haven't seen each other for so many years. Let's go for a walk and talk about our childhood. Gu Shishu cried, and her voice became more and more trembling. It was obvious that she was holding back her grievances. Because she was the cousin of the minister's mansion, many manners often ignored her when inviting people. So the minister's wife rarely took her out. Seeing her like this, Madam of the Prime Minister felt even more distressed. Thinking about it, it made sense. Because Gu Shishu was not the daughter of her mansion, other mansions rarely sent an invitation card to invite her directly. Even if she really loved her as her daughter, she owed her in this regard. During this period, she had been staying in the mansion and did not let her go out at all. This was also because the minister's wife was so angry that she asked her to be her second son's concubine. As a concubine, of course, it was inconvenient for her to go out in front of everyone. She also had to find a good marriage for her second son. Thinking of this, the minister's wife increasingly felt that Gu Shishu was really wronged. Her sister-in-law and her husband were about to return to the capital city. At this time, she couldn't let Gu Shishu feel wronged again. Well, don't cry. I'll find out who wants to frame you. The minister's wife's voice softened. While they were talking, a maid came in and reported, "Madam, third young master is here. Let him in." Hearing that her most promising youngest son had come, Madam Wen immediately became happy and said hurriedly. Gu Shishu also raised her head. Tears were still in the corners of her eyes, but a pair of watery eyes had eagerly looked at the door. When she saw Wen Shiqi at the door, the affection in her eyes almost overflowed. The handsome and elegant third cousin in front of her was the person she wanted to marry, not second cousin. In the past, when she hooked up with second cousin, she didn't think that she would marry second cousin, so she didn't care very much. In the end, because she could only follow second cousin, Wen Xian, the more she looked at him, the more she felt that Wen Xian was very stupid. How could the handsome third cousin compare with him? No. Because she really couldn't marry second cousin. She wanted to marry third cousin. There must be a way. There must be a way. Didn't Xiao Yanru also say that as long as she hadn't married second cousin, she would still have a chance? Unmarried men and unmarried women, there would be plenty of opportunities, wouldn't there? Thinking of this, Gu Shishu looked at Wen Shiqi with increasingly passionate eyes, and her eyes were full of affection. Wen Shiqi stepped forward, bowed to Madame Wen, and sat down. Gu Shishu hurriedly took 2 steps forward in a delicate manner, bowed to Wen Shiqi, and said, "Greetings, third cousin." She had cried just now, and her face was still wet with tears, which was extremely attractive. Especially her eyes, which were overflowing with charm, looked at Wen Shiqi softly. Perhaps because when Shichi didn't say anything for a long time, her body swayed, her feet slanted, and she couldn't stand still and fell straight toward Wen Shichi. When Shichi reached out to hold her hand, and Gu Shishu involuntarily leaned against him. Even though Madame Wen felt that she owed Gu Shishu, she couldn't bear to see it anymore and snorted coldly. When Shichi stood up and leaned to one side. As soon as he loosened his grip, Gu Shishu's body bumped straight into the chair he had been sitting on. With a cry of ouch, Gu Shishu failed to control her movements and bumped into the railing of the chair. It was so painful that 2 drops of tears at the corners of her eyes immediately fell down, making her look extremely miserable. Sit down and talk. Madame Wen's face darkened. No matter how partial she was to Gu Shishu, she couldn't help getting angry at this time. Gu Shishu was now her second son's woman, but she still pulled her youngest son. It was improper. Seeing that Madame Wen was really angry, Gu Shishu didn't dare to move anymore. She endured the pain of hitting the chair, sat under it, and looked obedient. A trace of disgust flashed across Wen Shichi's eyes, but he calmly sat down on the chair opposite her, as if the scene just now had no effect on him at all. Mother, I've already checked. No one has been to the place where 4th Miss Xiao fell into the water. Only my cousin took her there. When Shichi reported to Prime Minister Wen's madam, who had asked her youngest son to check it out. If there was really someone with bad intentions in the mansion, it would be a disaster if he stayed in the mansion. Moreover, this always reminded her of her youngest daughter who died young, and she inexplicably felt that there might be some involvement. But now it seemed that this matter really had nothing to do with anyone except Gu Shishu. Hearing her youngest son's words, Madame Wen looked at Gu Shishu suspiciously. Aunt, 3rd cousin, this really has nothing to do with me. I was really wronged. In fact, I don't know anything except that I asked 4th Miss Xiao to go there. Seeing that the situation was not good, Gu Shishu immediately burst into tears again. Tears slid down her white and tender face, which made people feel sorry for her. Madame Wen, in particular, opened her mouth to comfort Gu Shishu, and suddenly heard her youngest son say, "Cousin, when my sister had an accident, you seemed to say the same thing. Why are you saying this now?" In fact, Wen Shichi's words were unintentional. But as soon as he finished speaking, not only did his face change greatly, but also Madame Wen's face turned as pale as snow. Both of them fixed their eyes on Gu Shishu. Chapter 879. In fact, Wen Shichi just said that casually. But after saying that, his head buzzed, and doubts that he had never had immediately rose in his heart. Wen Shichi still remembered what had happened when his sister had an accident. At that time, Gu Shishu and Wen Xian were indeed playing together. But later, Gu Shishu was called away, leaving Wen Xian alone. Then the wet nurse who was guarding Wen Xian was also called away. When everyone finally found Wen Xian, her little body was already dead. At that time, Madame of the Prime Minister cried and fainted beside her daughter. Gu Shishu kept calling her cousin and cried so hard that she couldn't get up. She only said that if she hadn't left at that time, her cousin would have been fine. It was also because she cried and fainted with Madame of the Prime Minister. Madame of the Prime Minister doted on her so much that she even doted on her more than her sons. The two things inexplicably overlapped. Wen Shichi immediately remembered what had happened at that time. At that time, Gu Shishu was involved in it. In the past, he had never doubted Gu Shishu, nor had he thought of this old thing buried deep in his heart. But now he no longer believed in Gu Shishu, so he would naturally speculate about her with the greatest malice. Thinking of this, all the hair on his body stood on end. If his sister didn't really fall into the water, was it possible that Gu Shishu was the one who did it? Madame of the Prime Minister seemed to think of this. Her lips trembled twice, and she looked at Gu Shishu, but she couldn't say a word. She didn't dare to guess. 3rd cousin, what are you talking about? I was wrong about my cousin. I didn't keep an eye on her, so she. But what about 4th Miss Xiao? What does it have to do with me? 4th Miss Xiao is an adult, so it has nothing to do with me. I I really don't know who wants to hurt me and fourth Miss Xiao. Gu Shishu panicked and hurriedly covered her face and cried. This time, she didn't dare to cry like a pear blossom in the rain, but really cried. She leaned against the side of the chair and cried, if third cousin blames me for not taking good care of my cousin, I will admit it. Even if third cousin wants me to pay for my cousin's death, I will be willing. But I really don't admit what happened today. It really has nothing to do with me. Seeing that she was crying so hard that she collapsed on the chair, and hearing her say this, Madame Wenxiang's tears also fell. Her youngest daughter's death was a scar in her heart. No matter when it was touched, it would hurt. Alright, don't cry. You can't be blamed for this. It's all Yen-er's fault, it's all Yen-er's fault. Speaking up to this point, Madame Wenxiang started sobbing uncontrollably. Mother, don't be sad. Little sister, it's been so long. If little sister is still alive, she would have been reincarnated into a good family and would be living happily now. Seeing his mother crying like this, Wen Shiqi was afraid that she would hurt herself, so he tried to comfort her. Every time Madame Wenxiang thought of her youngest daughter, she couldn't stop crying. For so many years, Madame Wenxiang had been in poor health because of this incident. Sometimes she would faint while crying. Wen Shiqi didn't dare to let his mother continue crying like this, so he comforted her softly. I know. I also thought so. I thought that such a good girl as your little sister would definitely be reincarnated into a better family, but... Madame Wenxiang cried while wiping her tears. Aunt, I am willing to give up. This black hair prays for cousin sister. From now on, I only hope that cousin sister can marry into a good family and be happy and live a happy life. Gu Shishu also cried. Then she stood up and threw herself in front of Madame Wenxiang. She knelt down and put her hands under Madame Wenxiang's knees. Her words made Madame Wenxiang feel distressed and sad. Seeing Gu Shishu throw herself at her, she couldn't help hugging her and burst into tears. You. What are you talking about? You, as long as you are fine, I will be very happy. Your cousin doesn't need you to do this. All the previous displeasure and anger disappeared in Gu Shishu's crying. Madam of the Prime Minister hugged Gu Shishu and cried, as if she was hugging her own daughter. If her daughter was fine, she would have grown up now and could get married. She would also hug her so affectionately. Wen Shiqi frowned tightly, and a trace of fierceness flashed across his eyes. Since he suspected this matter, he had to investigate it. In fact, Wen Shiqi originally wanted to teach Gu Shishu a lesson so that she wouldn't dare to frame up Xiao Wanru in the future. The person he wanted to push into the water was Gu Shishu. Unexpectedly, the servant he sent only saw a mist there and thought it was Gu Shishu, so he pushed Xiao Keiling into the water. The scene he saw outside the study made Wen Shiqi realize that Gu Shishu had other intentions. It seemed that she wanted to threaten him and Xiao Wanru with this, so he immediately sent someone to take action. Although he was gentle, he never thought that he would always be upright and elegant. He should take action when it was time to take action. There seemed to be someone behind Gu Shishu. He did that not only to teach Gu Shishu a lesson, but also to force out the person behind Gu Shishu. He didn't expect that he would push the wrong person to the wrong person by accident. However, now it made him doubt what had happened in the past. After so many years, it was impossible to investigate this matter now. It seemed that his mother was very distressed about Gu Shishu, but when Shiqi felt that if he wanted to investigate it, there would be some clues. He was now in the Ministry of Justice, so it was easy for him to have doubts about some things. Gu Shishu looked guilty now. Since she was guilty, there must be something wrong. The next few days were very peaceful. Xiao Keiling's matter was not a big deal, an old madam just gave her some medicine to nourish her body. Because Xiao Wanru gave Xiao Keiling brown sugar hot ginger soup in time, Xiao Keiling was indeed frightened but not hurt. Marquis Xing's mansion was very busy in the next few days. The whole mansion was so busy that even old madam had to help Xiao Wanru choose and prepare for her marriage. Because of the recent events in Marquis Xing's mansion, except for Xiao Wanru's, none of them was good. Marquis Xing's mansion had to be very careful to prepare for Xiao Wanru's marriage. The Empress Dowager in the Imperial Palace even sent someone to warn old Madam of Marquis Xing's mansion, suggesting that if there was another accident in Xiao Wanru's marriage, Marquis Xing's mansion might even lose the title of nobility. Since the Empress Dowager's hint, old Madam did not dare to take it lightly. She did not intend to release her two granddaughters, who were locked up, lest they spoil things again. Zhao Shiran was quite useful. Although he was new to many things, he would always send them to old Madam and let her make a decision. Moreover, he listened to old Madam's orders very respectfully, which made old Madam very satisfied. Zhao Shiran was not as disgusted as before. She liked Zhao Shiran originally. Of course, this affection was also related to Minister Zhao's mansion behind Zhao Shiran. If it weren't for the demotion of nobility, old Madam would have valued Zhao Shiran more. Xiao Wanru still closed the door to sew embroidery. Xiao Keiling came over from time to help, but her help was different from that of Xiao Caihuan in the past. Xiao Keiling was not utilitarian. Sometimes when she felt that something was wrong, she would put forward her own opinions. Compared with Xiao Caihuan, the two of them got along more like equal sisters. In the whole Marquis Xing's mansion, only Xiao Keiling made Xiao Wanru feel some sisterly affection. It was also a very unexpected thing. Xiao Keiling was not close to Xiao Wanru. If it weren't for this accident, the two of them would not be so close. Time passed in the blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye, it was the day of Prince Chen's marriage. Xiao Wanru was called up early in the morning. She first took a bath and changed her clothes, and then she was taken to the dressing table to have her face washed. The status of the whole blessing madam was also extraordinary. In the past, she was the most distinguished whole blessing madam invited by some noble aristocratic families. The so-called whole blessing madam had to have both parents and children. The husband and wife should be in harmony with each other. Moreover, she had to be of noble status. It was really not easy to find such a whole blessing madam. Fortunately, today was Prince Chen's marriage, so they could invite this madam. Of course, this so-called whole blessing madam was actually a princess in the imperial family. Her status was not something that ordinary families could afford. However, when Prince Chen got married, the Empress Dowager's favorite grandson and the Emperor's favorite nephew were present. No one dared not to invite her. Looking at Xiao Wanru, who was exceedingly beautiful, Chuanfu madam kept praising her. She said that she had seen so many new brides, but she had never seen one as beautiful as Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru was so beautiful that she was the best match for Prince Chen. The Empress Dowager would definitely like her very much. Everyone who saw Prince Chen's face said that he was extremely handsome, like a beautiful young man coming out of a painting. Many people had been secretly mocking the fifth miss of Marquis Xing's mansion. If they lifted the red veil and found that the bride was not as beautiful as the groom, it would be a joke in the future. Whole blessing madam had secretly mocked Xiao Wanru in her heart before. Now seeing Xiao Wanru's face, she had to say that the two of them were really a match made in heaven. With such a beautiful appearance, no one else could match her. This would be the most pleasing to the eyes, and also the most compatible pair. Whole blessing madam kept praising Xiao Wanru with a smile, while helping to lift Xiao Wanru's veil. Xiao Wanru's smooth little face became more moist because of this. It was unknown whether it was because the hair on her face had been plucked or because of the atmosphere here, but Xiao Wanru's face had been red all the time, which made her look more delicate and charming. On such a good day, Xiao Caihuan and Xiao Jia were also released. If they still didn't come out on such a good day, their marriage would be affected. Zhao Shiran personally pleaded for them, and Xiao Wanru did not object, so old madam complied and released all of them. Xiao Jia sat aside and looked at Xiao Wanru's beautiful face with jealousy. The handkerchief in her hand was almost crushed. How nice it would be if she were the one who got married at this time. Now she was not sure whether Commandery Prince Qing's mansion wanted her or her third sister. She hadn't finished what her grandma had asked her to do before, so she didn't dare to ask old madam. Chapter 880. Xiao Caihuan was also looking at Xiao Wanru with envy and sadness in her eyes. After so many things, she now understood that some things were too delusional. She lowered her head slightly with a veil still on her face. Her face had not recovered yet, and it was uncertain whether it could recover. Thinking that she had dared to have thoughts about Prince Chen before, she felt a deep sense of inferiority. How could a person like Prince Chen take a fancy to a disfigured girl like her? Moreover, she almost got her whole family killed. If she had any delusions before, now she had nothing. Sister. Xiao Kailing sat beside her. Seeing her like this, she reached out to hold her hand and comforted her. Xiao Caihuan shook her head, took a deep breath, and motioned for Xiao Kailing not to worry. After such a thing, she had no other thoughts in her heart now. She only felt that her family was safe and sound. She had really been bewitched before. Perhaps she had been suppressed by Xiao Yanru all the time. Once Xiao Yanru was gone, she immediately became arrogant. With a wry smile on her lips, she raised her eyes and looked at Xiao Wanru with a little envy. Her lost fifth sister was blessed after all. Judging from Prince Chen's look that day, she knew that he really cared about her. Who in the capital city could make Prince Chen, who was so handsome as if he had walked out of a painting, pay so much attention to her? It was said that Prince Chen was weak and couldn't marry a wife, but the royal family didn't care so much. Even if Prince Chen was really going to die, he would still marry someone he should marry. Prince Chen hadn't married for so many years just because Prince Chen didn't like her. In the past few days, Xiao Caihuan had been very quiet in the Buddha Hall, which also reminded her of many things. If it was really as she guessed, then her fifth sister's blessing was really limitless. If there was a man in this world who waited for her to grow up, what kind of affection would it be? Moreover, such a man was born in the royal family. 3 years ago, her fifth sister was actually just a child, but 3 years ago, Prince Chen could get married. The more he thought about it, the more ridiculous he felt. He was like a clown. Even when he had his appearance, he was not a match for fifth younger sister, let alone now. Even when Xiao Yanru had a good reputation, Prince Chen had not been tempted. For this reason, Xiao Caihuan gave up. There was a hint of blessing in her envious eyes, hoping that Xiao Wanru was really happy. There were many girls of this generation in Duke Xing's mansion, but the first few were not so good. Third younger sister, I really didn't do it on purpose that day. I hope third younger sister can forgive me. A gentle voice suddenly came into her ears. It was Zhao Shiran's voice. Sister-in-law. Xiao Caihuan's eyes turned cold. Third sister. Zhao Shiran's face was full of guilt, and he looked more and more sad. He wanted to explain, but was interrupted by Xiao Caihuan. Sister-in-law, today is fifth sister's big day. Don't say those hurtful words. Even if I misunderstood you before, please forgive me. Xiao Caihuan's words were very clear, and she did not argue about who was right or wrong. Now that things had come to this, she had no other thoughts. The reason why she made a scene in Zhao Shiran's bridal chamber was that she was afraid that her parents would be involved in this matter. However, she could not explain it clearly, so she could only lead her grandmother's attention to Zhao Shiran through this matter. The matter had passed, but the past could not be recovered. It was impossible for them to be as close as before. Zhao Shiran was now the eldest sister-in-law, but he was just the eldest sister-in-law, and he was the sister-in-law of the next branch. Naturally, they were not so close. Zhao Shiran still wanted to say something, but seeing that Xiao Caihuan had looked away, he knew that it was useless for him to say anything. Xiao Jia rubbed her handkerchief and her eyes fell on Zhao Shiran and Xiao Caihuan. She was sitting in a corner, so she was not noticeable. Zhao Shiran and Xiao Caihuan's voices were a little low, and the people in the room were noisy. She could not hear what they were talking about, but she was sure that they were not very happy. She rolled her eyes and called a servant girl. When she was about to give some orders, she suddenly turned around and saw Zhao Shiran's eyes falling on her. Their eyes met. Xiao Jia panicked for a while, but Zhao Shiran showed a slight smile and moved his lips silently. Be careful. Hearing Zhao Shiran's silent voice, Xiao Jia panicked. Second Mississippi, the servant girl she called was already standing in front of her. Seeing her stunned, she called out. It's all right. You can go. Xiao Jia waved her hand and said. She did want to do something, but now she didn't dare to. Zhao Shiran had seen her. The silent warning made her not dare to act rashly. After thinking for a while, she didn't take out the other handkerchief in her sleeve. She couldn't see through Zhao Shiran, so she didn't know whether he would help her or Zhao Shiran. At this time, Xiao Jia felt that it was better not to act rashly. Moreover, Zhao Shiran's words were obviously a warning. The handkerchief was the same as her ordinary handkerchief, but it was embroidered with the character Xiao. The incense was also Xiao Wanru's favorite incense in the past. Such a handkerchief could easily make people think that it belonged to Xiao Wanru. On such a happy day today, if such a handkerchief was found on another man, Xiao Wanru's reputation would be ruined. But she suddenly didn't dare to do it. Xiao Wanru's head was covered with a veil, so she couldn't see what was going on outside. However, Yujie had been staring at the sisters of Marquis Xing's mansion, so she naturally saw that Xiao Jia had asked the servant girl she had called to leave after silently looking at first grandma. She had an intuition that there was something wrong. Second Miss was the kind of person who would make trouble out of nothing. She watched Xiao Jia's hand leave the cuff silently. While no one was paying attention, she tidied Xiao Wanru's collar and told Xiao Jia what she had seen just now in a low voice. Xiao Wanru said in a low voice, "Ask Qing to keep an eye on her later." Yujie nodded. At this time, the bride's escort had arrived outside. No one expected that Prince Chen would welcome them in person. It seemed impossible for Prince Chen to welcome them in person, both in terms of his identity and his health. Marquis Xing's mansion had already made such preparations. When they saw Prince Chen, who was dressed in red and had black hair, looking handsome and enchanting as usual, the guests were all in an uproar. Prince Chen actually came to welcome them in person. There was a smile on Chu Liuchen's face, which made him look very gentle. He was dressed in a bright red brocade robe, which made his face and lips look very handsome. Not only did he come, but he also brought a group of royal brothers with him. Whether it was Prince Yu, Prince Shou, or even Prince Xian, they all let everyone see the four outstanding heirs of the royal family at once. There must be the next emperor among them. Thinking of this, many people screamed with excitement. In addition to these royal brothers, there were also some princes, dukes, and marquises from the princesses' mansions. Each of them was outstanding. Even if they didn't want to marry into the royal family, with so many handsome talents, the whole capital city was very lively. Fortunately, the road for the bride's escort had already been cleared. Otherwise, it was hard to say when they would arrive at Marquis Xing's mansion. Although these people were all noble, they were all talented. All the way to the bridal chamber, the obstacles set by Marquis Xing's mansion were soon removed. In a burst of laughter, Xiao Wanru heard the footsteps coming towards her. She heard the voice of Prince Chen. It should be Chu Liuchen. She inexplicably blushed. According to the custom in the capital city, the groom entered the mansion first, then left to wait outside the mansion, and the bride's brother carried the bride out of the mansion. Chu Liuchen stood in front of Xiao Wanru and looked at Xiao Wanru, who was wearing a red veil. His eyes became more and more tranquil, with joy that could not be seen in the past. After putting the jade apple in his hand in front of Xiao Wanru, he turned around and left with a group of royal disciples to wait outside. His light and vigorous footsteps made a group of women, who had been sad, feel even more sad. Didn't they say that Prince Chen was in poor health? As the matron of honor said happy and auspicious words, she put the jade apple in Xiao Wanru's hand and helped Xiao Wanru to get up. Xiao Hua had been waiting at the door for a long time. After Xiao Wanru came out, he carried Xiao Wanru to the gate. Xiao Wanru had no parents. Old Madam of Marquis Xing's mansion and Rui and great elder princess were sitting in the main seats in the hall outside. Rui, and great elder princess, had won her dignity when she fought with old madam of Marquis Xing's mansion. At this time, she was sitting high. When she saw Xiao Hua and carrying Xiao Wanru out, her eyes turned red. After Xiao Wanru stopped and bowed to the two elders, Rui, and great elder princess, wiped her tears. However, old madam, who did not look so domineering, looked very relaxed. She only took a handkerchief and gently wiped the corners of her eyes, and then gave orders in an orderly manner. Rui, and great elder princess, burst into tears. Xiao Wanru bowed to the two elders again and then left in a panic while Rui, and great elder princess, cried. Tears fell from the corners of her eyes. In her last life, she had also been married. At that time, no one cried for her anymore. Madame Dowager and Shui Rulin had passed away. How could Madame D care about her life? She had schemed against her and wanted to leave early. Her tears fell silently on the ground in front of her. In this life, she had found her family again. To her, this was the most precious thing. For the sake of this family that she could protect, she would not let those people have their way no matter what. The bridal sedan was parked at the door. It was not an ordinary sedan but a big sedan with 8 people. After sitting in the bridal sedan, Xiao Wanru calmed down. Hearing the sound of starting the sedan coming from outside, she calmed down. The bridal sedan did not go directly to Prince Chen's mansion. It first went around half of the capital city, past the front of the imperial palace, and then went to Prince Chen's mansion. People in the capital city had also seen Prince Chen, who was the most difficult to see because of his illness. For the first time, Prince Chen, who was pale and weak in the past, became lively. It turned out that Prince Chen was not as sick as others said. He was so handsome and unparalleled. This was the most noble Prince Chen. Did they misunderstand something? Does Chu Luchen have other intentions? At the gate of the palace, a person happened to come out. Seeing the bridal sedan passing in front of the palace gate, he suddenly stopped and whispered to the person beside him. Chapter 881. Master, I don't know. Shichi looked at the bridal sedan chair that was going away behind him and said. When a prince got married, he went to the gate of the palace, which was a sign of respect for the emperor who lived in the palace. At the same time, it also showed his filial piety to the emperor. But Chu Liuchen's identity was so unusual that people had to think more. Marrying the granddaughter of Rui, and great elder princess. Prince Ching muttered to himself and his face darkened. It was no wonder that he thought too much. He was going to attend the marriage of Prince Chen's mansion, but he just came from the palace. Both the emperor and the empress dowager expressed their love for this marriage, which was really surprising. Could it be that the 5th Miss Xiao, whom Chu Luchen married, was very fond of the empress dowager and the emperor? Or could it be understood that Chu Luchen was satisfied with the 5th Miss Xiao because of the emperor and the empress dowager's satisfaction? If so, Chu Liuchen's request was not ordinary. Moreover, Chu Liuchen's health had improved and he was no longer in a bad condition. Master. Seeing Prince Cheng looking at the back of the bridal sedan chair with a gloomy face, Shichi reminded him. They were still at the gate of the palace, and today was Prince Chen's big day. All the members of the royal family had to show a happy look. Prince Cheng coughed hard and showed a kind smile on his face. Maybe because he had stayed in the temple for a long time, his smile looked very peaceful, but people could feel that he was really happy. Prince Chen is married now. That's great. Prince Cheng muttered to himself. Then he seemed to think of something again. He sighed softly and got on his carriage outside the palace gate. He was Chu Liuchen's uncle, but he seemed to sigh for Chu Luchen. If he had to sigh for something, it would be Chu Liuchen's life experience, which corresponded with his gloomy face before. It was normal for him to think of his brother who died early when he saw his nephew getting married. If someone would suspect something, he would definitely suspect Chu Luchen. Although the identity of the former emperor's legitimate son was not mentioned now, it did not mean that no one cared about it, especially the one in the palace now. Prince Qing did not believe that the emperor really did not care about Chu Liuqin's identity. Xiao Wanru's bridal sedan chair moved forward, followed by 128 carriages of dowry, each of which was full. The first one was awarded by the Empress Dowager, then by the emperor, and then by the empress. Such a lineup was more prominent than that of Infanta Qinghua's marriage into Duke Xing's mansion. Many people were envious of Chu Liuqin, who was like an orchid in front of her. Everyone in the capital city was sighing that the fifth miss of Marquis Xing's mansion was so lucky to have such a husband. The bridal sedan finally stopped at the gate of Prince Chen's mansion after traveling through most of the capital city. The gate of Prince Chen's mansion, which had always been deserted, was very lively today. The emperor specially mentioned Chu Liuqin's marriage and invited all the ministers to attend the wedding banquet as the elder of the groom. Since the emperor had said so, who dared not to come? Of course, those who did not have a high status could only send a gift, and they could not enter. Those who came were all aristocratic families and high-ranking officials. There was no female master in Prince Chen's mansion. The Empress Dowager specially sent her 2 nannies to take charge of the wedding banquet to entertain the madams and misses from various mansions. With the Empress Dowager's servants holding the fort inside, everything in the inner courtyard was arranged in an orderly manner. Bridal sedan chair. After landing, Xiao Wanru waited at the door of the bridal sedan chair for a long time. She moved her feet uneasily in the bridal sedan chair. She did not understand why Chu Liuqin waited for such a long time when he should be in front of her bridal sedan chair at this time. While thinking, she suddenly felt the bridal sedan chair shake. She immediately reached out and pressed the sedan chair pillar on one side to stabilize herself. Then the sedan chair shook twice, and the crowd outside cheered loudly. It should be Chu Liuqin's last 3 arrows. Someone lifted the curtain of the sedan chair, put one end of a red ribbon in her hand, and the other end in Chu Liuqin's hand. Chu Liuqin led Xiao Wanru across the brazier and then entered the high hall. In the high hall, there was a matron of honor waiting. When they came over, it was just the auspicious time for the newlyweds to bow. Hearing the noise in her ears, Xiao Wanru was inexplicably confused. In her last life, when she and Wen Shiqi got married, Wen Shiqi had been too sick to get up, and his elder brother took the place of the wedding ceremony. At that time, the noise outside was also so noisy. She inexplicably panicked and moved her feet uneasily. Her hand holding the red ribbon was held by a big hand, and she heard Chu Liuqin's elegant voice in her ears, "Don't panic." She stopped and took a deep breath. The warm touch in her hand told her that this life was not the last life. No one bowed on her behalf, and it was really Chu Liuqin. She lowered her watery eyes and saw a pair of thin boots with golden lines and dragon patterns under the veil. The patterns were in the shape of waves, but they were inlaid with gold edges, which could not be worn by ordinary people. Therefore, she was really getting married. The matron of honor was already shouting, "Bow to heaven and earth." Xiao Wanru reacted a little slower, and then she sensed that the pair of big hands gently led her in a direction. She lowered her head and saw someone in the crowd laughing. Prince Qin seems to really like the bride. He must like her, otherwise he wouldn't welcome her in person. She's lucky. The voice was not loud, and it must be because Chu Liuqin gently pointed her in a direction just now. Her cheeks under the veil turned pink. She bit her lip, and her eyes became more and more misty. Then she slightly raised the corners of her mouth. When Shiqi stood behind a group of guests and watched Chu Liuqin lead Xiao Wanru to bow and Chu Liuqin reach out to guide Xiao Wanru. Although he only moved slightly, he could often lead Xiao Wanru in a direction. When Shiqi frowned and felt inexplicably uncomfortable. There seemed to be something pressing on his heart, which was very thick and heavy, so heavy that he almost felt out of breath. There had never been such a scene in his dream, but he inexplicably felt that there should be such a scene. But what was wrong? Why was it like this? Under the guidance of Chu Liuqin, the bride under the red veil bowed to the heaven and earth to get married with him. Her silent trust in Chu Liuqin could be felt even through the red veil. The dazzling red almost burned his sight, and the complexity in his eyes finally condensed into a deep sorrow. Whether the woman in his memory was Xiao Wanru or not, he seemed to have missed her. If there was a previous life, did it mean that he had missed Xiao Wanru in this life? He clenched his hands tightly and his lips turned pale. If his dream in the past was as clear as it was now, would he desperately propose to Xiao Wanru? Then was she his bride at this moment? Wrong? This thought had never occurred to his mind before, but at this time, it was so strong and scorching that he couldn't ignore it. Even if he wanted to ignore it, he couldn't. He even had an impulse to directly pull her away in the auditorium. At this moment, it had never been so clear to him that he wanted Xiao Wanru. Whether it was the one in his dream or the one in front of him, it seemed that they should all be his. He believed that there was a previous life and this life. But he clearly realized that he was too late. He hated this feeling, but he really felt it. Yuan Qing, do you feel uncomfortable? Chu Youyue's voice came into his ears. Suppressing the rolling regret in his heart, when Shiqi slowly relaxed his clenched hands and said, I'm fine. I just feel a little uncomfortable. Maybe it's because there are too many people, so I made a fuss. Then let's go out for a walk. Chu Luiyue said calmly. He said with a smile. When Shiqi looked up at him and immediately noticed that Chu Luiyue smiled involuntarily. They had known each other for a long time, so how could he not see the stiffness of Chu Luiyue's smile? He calmly glanced at Chu Luqian, who was saluting, nodded and strode out. At this moment, everyone was paying attention to Chu Luqian's salute, so they didn't see them walk out. Soon, they walked out of the wedding hall where the salute was held. Yuan Qing, let's go over there. There are fewer people there and it's quieter. Chu Luiyue smiled and pointed to a door on the right, which was the door leading to the inner courtyard. Chu Luiyue had been here several times, so he was very familiar with it. There was no mistress in Prince Chen's mansion now, so Chu Luqian lived alone in the so-called inner courtyard. It didn't matter if he offended anyone or not. When Shiqi nodded, and the two of them turned around the moon cave gate. Yuan Qing, what do you think of third brother's health? Both of them seemed to have something on their minds. After walking quietly for a while, Chu Luiyue broke the silence and asked. Prince Chen seems to be in good health. When Shiqi said calmly. You think so too? I think so too. But can third brother's illness of congenital fetal poison be cured so easily? Chu Luiyue didn't believe it and said. Chu Luiyue found that Chu Luqian was in good spirits and was healthy in all aspects, which made Chu Luiyue feel very strange. He had asked many people to see Chu Luqian before, but now it seemed that Chu Luqian was really fine. However, several imperial physicians of the Imperial Institute of Medicine shook their heads and said that Chu Luqian couldn't recover. How could he really get better? Your Highness, have you checked the medical records? When Shiqi said lightly. I have, but I can't find out what happened later. Now that Chu Luiyue regarded Wen Shiqi as his confidant, he didn't hide some things from him. Since Wen Shiqi helped him deal with Xiao Wanru, Wen Shiqi was on Chu Luiyue's side. He almost killed Xiao Wanru as a bane. At that time, Chu Luiyue also felt very sorry that he didn't help Xiao Yanru. Now thinking of it, he felt lucky. Fortunately, Xiao Wanru was fine. This feeling also made him very uncomfortable with the joyous scene at present, but he just suppressed these discomforts to the bottom of his heart. When he waited for the position in the future, it would be easy for him to get Princess Chen. With Chu Liuqin's health, it should not be difficult for him to die of illness. But now he had new doubts, so he took Wen Shiqi out for a walk and asked Wen Shiqi to give him advice.